can't live by bread alone. Can't live by bread alone. Yeah, this word got food in it. Stepping on the devil dome. You should see the bruise in it. Backing out the scripts. Told a demon to stand down. Go against the Most High. We gon' see how it pan out. The Father gave me hope. Fill me with the ghosts. Now they hate it when I glow. Joseph with the coat. Looking for their fruit, but they ain't got no cantaloupe. The Messiah over Lio. You can't be a fan of both. Can't serve two masters. Bread of heaven with the living water. Yeah, serving up a truth platter. We ain't idolizing no folly. Now we setting up a new standard. When Christ touched down, make the whole earth shake like Bruce Banner. Yeah, bringing them troops to ya. End times getting spookier. Warfare getting nuclear. Mankind getting goofier. They intoxicated with a wine, damn, she done roofied them. I'm checking every word. Spirit doctrine like a proofreader. I hate these Nicolatans. Hate these graven idols, man, I hate these flipping pagans. Trying to play my father and I hate these imitations. Screaming out Hosanna, we escape that simulation. Better flee to me, vote these or else that lake is where you laying. Great is he inside of me, casting out this net like I was by the Sea of Galilee. Harvest gon' be plenty, but the laborers are few. Matthew 17 and 20, there ain't nothing we can't do. I can't be no lukewarm, fringes with the blue on. Devil wanna deal, but I told him this ain't Groupon. Praise to the Almighty, you know we gon' sing a new song. Hail the King of King, the ultra low, no Jimmy Neutron. If you keep his laws and his commands, then we can fellowship. I don't get with Pharisees and I don't rock with Hellenists. I ain't praising man, cause only Father get my reverence. I'm swimming in the word, it got me feeling like a yellowfin. Yeah, big stepper, Mr. Demon Chin Checker, trying to hear that well done, cause I feel that displeasure. Father pouring out the wrath, and he got a big measure. If it ain't about the kingdom, then I don't give a six letter. You got faith in the Messiah, you got power. I was clean up in that blood just like a shower. Isaiah 5, you were the vine that came out sour. But now we stand and giving glory in this hour. Yeah, we breaking them curses, fleeing the ways of the serpent. Follow his word and pray for discernment, cause they want us laying in hearses. We gotta rise up, raise and resurface. Choose life and stay in your purpose. The price was paid like a merchant, through Christ who came as a servant. See, the kingdom is ready to beg, but yet somehow they chasing a Birkin. After this you ain't getting a chance. While you living you can't better search him. Gotta call on his name like his urchin. Never knowing that day is emerging, so repent at the weight of perversions. Judgment coming, that thing is for certain. Let's go.
Shalawam family, it's your brother Yasharahla from the House of Bread, and I have to give all praises, all glory, and all honor to the Most High God, whose name is YAHAWAH. Of course I do so in the name of his only begotten Son, Hamashiach, Yahawashi, who the world ignorantly calls Jesus Christ. Make sure you make your way over to HIBofficialZion.com and get you a copy of the HIB, the Hebrew Israelite Bible. Shalawam, Yasharahla.
The Hebrew Israelite Bible is the first of its kind, restoring the names of persons, places, and things in the ancient Hebrew dialect, colloquially referred to amongst the Israelite community as the Lashawan Quadash. Most importantly, it preserves the Most High's name YAHAWAH in the Paleo-Hebrew script. The Hebrew Israelite Bible comes complete with all 80 books found in the 1611 King James Version Bible, including the Apocrypha.
All right, all praise to the Most High. Shalawam family. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, all glory, and all honor unto the Most High God, whose name is YAHAWAH. Of course, I do so in the name of his only begotten Son, Hamashiach Yahawashi, who the world ignorantly calls Jesus Christ. It's your brother Yasharahla. I'm joined by Yasharahla here at the House of Bread. And today, man, we are going to dive into a topic that has been, of course, circulating within the Israelite community for the past about a month and a half or so, concerning Gentile salvation, so-called. And as it pertains to Gentile salvation, Christians and Hebrew Israelites who are Christian-leaning purport that Cornelius, he's a Gentile, guys. He's a Gentile. He's more than likely an Edomite. He's from the Italian band, right? So we're going to dive into some history, right? We're going to go through some scholarly sources, right, to demonstrate emphatically what was going on, what was the political landscape, what was going on in the centuries prior to the so-called New Testament, right? If many of you guys are familiar with the Bible, you understand that we have the so-called Old Testament. It ends with the book of Malachi, right? And then after the book of Malachi, we have what's known as the intertestamental period, what scholars call the intertestamental period, where it's seeming that God is not speaking through to the prophets, right? There's no major prophets on the scene. The last major prophet we see, we see Malachi, we see Ezra, and that's about it, right? So in between the so-called Old Testament and the so-called New Testament, right, there's a whole kingdom, an entire beast, right, whose dealings we don't see, right? When we dive into the Bible and look at the biblical history, we see the Assyrians and their ascent to power, right? Prior to that, we see, of course, the Egyptians. We get gathered out of Egypt, we enter into the land of Canaan, we conquer the land. We don't cast out all of the Canaanites as we were commanded to, right? We go into a cycle of just going into captivity after captivity after captivity by the surrounding nations. The Most High God sends us, the children of Israel, a savior as we cry unto him. Then we see, the rise of the Davidic dynasty, right? We see David, he comes to power, right? Solomon comes into power after we had the building of the temple. After Solomon's reign, we see the splitting of the kingdom, northern and southern kingdom, Judah and Israel. And then both of these kingdoms, right, were divided. There's a middle wall of partition, right, between us. And we begin to go into idolatry, right? We begin to follow the ways of the nations around us, right? Northern Kingdom, primarily, they relied on the Assyrians and followed their ways. Southern Kingdom, we would follow Egypt. And the Most High God, of course, he casts Israel out of the land. He sends the Assyrians against them, right? After that, about 200 plus years after that, about roughly around 200 years after that, the Southern Kingdom, we get taken into Babylonian captivity, right? The Babylonians get taken down by, of course, the Medo-Persians. We're allowed to come back to Jerusalem to rebuild. The Northern Kingdom never comes back, by and large, right? Then we skip over that and we get to the time of the Romans. Now, when we look at Daniel, the second chapter, we see that there's a statue that Nebuchadnezzar sees, and it's a dream that represents the different kingdoms that were ruling the earth. You have the Neo-Babylonian Empire, the Medo-Persian Empire, the Greek Empire, and then we see the Roman Empire. And of course, we see that Roman Empire is divided, and that's the time that we're living in today. That corresponds to Daniel, the seventh chapter, where you have 4 beasts. You have a lion with wings, right, representing Babylon. You have a bear with 3 ribs in his mouth, lifted up on one side, representing the Medo-Persians. Then we have the leopard with its 4 heads and the 6 wings, representing the Greeks. And then after that, we have a dreadful beast that has all these horns, right? So that's the backdrop of the time frame when Christ is on the scene, right? That we pick up in the book of Matthew, right? But in between that time, there's a bunch of history that's found in the so-called Apocrypha, right? We had the story of the Maccabees, and that goes into attesting to everything that was going on. And honestly, not in totality. There's a whole bunch more that goes on, and that's not necessarily recorded in the book of First and Second Maccabees. And we're going to dive into that today, all right, through the spirit and power of YAHAWAH, shanyam-ishar. All right. So again, make sure you guys like and share the video. Make sure you guys like and share the video. All right. And because again, we need our community to be equipped to go against these false doctrines that are appearing. Now, I'm sure many of you guys watched my last video where I went into how our good brothers, our beloved brothers, that they're teaching a different gospel, right? If you haven't watched that after this video, right, you should watch that video as well so that you can get a fuller understanding. We're going to dive into the topic of Cornelius, okay, in this episode, in this lesson. And then, Lord willing, within the next week or so, maybe 2 weeks, I will be doing a lesson on Acts, the 17th chapter. Got some very important information that will put all of that into proper perspective. And that lesson will tie into this lesson. The history that we see in this lesson, right, is going to tie in with the lesson concerning Acts, the 17th chapter, right? So again, here we are. We're discussing Cornelius. Was he an Israelite or an Edomite? Okay, that is the question, all right, for today. All right, so let me go ahead and let's go like this. Present. Watch this. Here we go. Right. Can everyone see my screen?
Okay.
Yeah. We're not talking about the Hebrew language today. I will be doing another video concerning the Hebrew language in the conversation that I had with the good brother Zion Lex. Beautiful conversation that was had on Inside the Nation Radio last week, Friday. Right. So I've just been super busy, family, between that, preparing for that dialogue, and doing that presentation, right. And of course, getting this presentation together while being a brand new father. So it's been a lot. I was just telling my wife today that this year has felt like a constant battle. Like I've constantly been at war, right. And not talking about like beef. I'm talking about in spiritual warfare, right?
Okay.
Of course, at the beginning of the year, I had to go against a heretical doctrine concerning the pre-incarnation of Christ. Then we know what happened during March, April of this year. And now here we are attacking this simultaneous Gentile salvation concept. And again, I did a peer review. If you haven't watched that peer review, make sure you tap into that as well. There's a plethora of information, scholarship that's been being put out here on the House of Bread. So make sure you guys if you're not subscribed to this channel, you subscribe, but also subscribe to House of Bread, right? The other Sharyam here in the House of Bread, we have Shahar Kahan, Kalaki Howah, as well as Shanyam-ishar. They do a class typically every Monday on the House of Bread channel. So if you're not subscribed to House of Bread, make sure you guys do that. Right. Again, please like and share the video. All right. So we're talking about Cornelius the centurion, right? So let's lay out some key information concerning Cornelius, right? And then I'll try to remember. I'm going to try to put the PDF of this presentation in the description once we're done. All right. So if you don't see it in the description within the next day or two, shoot a comment, say, hey, can you put the presentation in the description, and I'll do so. All right. So we have Cornelius, the centurion. He lived in Caesarea, which is in Israel, right? With his family. Very important to understand and note, right? He is described as a devout man who feared the Most High God, right? There's a little typo right there. I'll get that fixed, right? He gave many alms to the people, i.e. the Israelites. He was uncircumcised. That's very important, right? When you see like these bolded words, right? Pay attention to them, write them down, right? We're going to address these things. He was uncircumcised, and according to the apostolic constitutions, right? Book 7. He was the second bishop of Caesarea, right? Now, in their initial presentation, which has changed since it first came out, the good brothers Deacon and Hassad, they made mention of Caesarea, how it was a predominantly Greek city, right? And you had a lot of Romans. It was Romans and Greeks that were living there primarily, right? So let's dive into some of the history of Caesarea. So originally it was a Phoenician colony called Straton's Tower, right? Again, it was a Phoenician colony, right? Established by the Zidonians, Phoenicians, Canaanites. It was called Straton's Tower. It was established by Abdashart, the first king of Sidon, who's also known as Straton the First. And this happened in the 4th century BC, right? So that would be the 5th century, right? No, that would be no, that's the 4th century. It would be First centuries. That would be in the 500s, right? So it was conquered by the Hasmonean dynasty under King Alexander of Janneus, right? Who's also known as Jonathan. And this happened in 90 CE as a naval hub, right? So as the Hasmoneans were expanding their influence, right, they went and conquered this particular site, took it from the Zidonians, right? Because they wanted to have access to the sea. They needed some type of naval power, right? Now, of course, you fast forward to the things that happen, right? The Romans, they come into power, right? And when the Romans come into power, we see Herod, he is exalted as the client king of Judea, right? And he expands the city between 22 and 10 BCE, right? As a Roman administrative and trade hub, right? So very important to pay attention to. Here we see, actually, I think I want to change our layout. Give me 1 second. Let's change our layout. Yeah, let's go like that, right? Let's get this a little bit bigger. Maximize. Right? Okay, yeah, we're going to maximize it, right? Our faces are not important. So Josephus attests to tens of thousands of Jews living in Caesarea, right? Very important to understand, right? Again, our good brothers made it seem as, oh my God, this was a Greek city, right? It was mostly Greeks, and that is true. However, there was tens of thousands of Jews living in Caesarea, right? And there was tension between Jews and Syrians. Most of the Greek population, right? Most of the Greek population, they were ethnic, they were Syrians, right? They were classified as Syrians, right? And that is important, right? As we dive into some of this history, right? Now, there was again tension between the Jews that Josephus attests to against the Syrians, and there was a large population of quote unquote Greeks, which would include Hellenized individuals. Okay, so now I want to take you guys' attention to this lexicon. This is known, Slacker. This is known as the BDAG, right? I have the physical copy right here in my hand, right? This picture, I took this physical picture from the book that's in my hand. And this is from page 251. And this is the entry for the word Helen, right? Helen. This word is used all throughout the New Testament and is translated as both Greek as well as Gentile. And that's why I was translated in the so-called New Testament, right? So we see the entry, it says Greek, a man of Greek language and culture, right? And it names a bunch of sources. And then it goes on to say, it says about barbarian, right? Barbarians were called Helen, right? And then the second entry, it says, in the broader sense, all persons who came under the influence of Greek, i.e. pagan culture. Okay, again, Greek, i.e. pagan culture. Now, when we take a look, for instance, this word is used in Mark the 7th chapter to describe the Canaanite woman that we read about also in Matthew the 15th chapter. So we see that the Canaanites, they were Hellenized, right? Syrians were Hellenized. Jews were Hellenized, right? The Egyptians were Hellenized. There are a plethora of different people groups who were conquered by Alexander and his armies, right? And after his death, the four Diadochi, right? They split up his kingdom and they continue the spreading of Hellenism, right? Which is Greek thought. Okay? Very important to understand. So the word Hellen, right? Not to be confused with the word Hellenistes, which specifically is used in reference to Greek-speaking Jews, right? When we're looking at here in the New Testament, Jews, Grecians, Gentiles, right? We're looking at Israelites, primarily of the southern kingdom, who remained in what's called Jewry, meaning they kept the commandments, right? When we read in Acts, the 2nd chapter, we see how there's a plethora of Jews, right? Devout men out of every nation, right? Who are coming where? To Jerusalem for the Feast of Pentecost or the Feast of First Fruits, right? Those individuals are still Jews, right? They remained in Jewry. Then we have Hellenistes. Someone like Paul could be considered a Hellenistes. Someone like Stephen, he's called a Hellenistes, right? Stephen, who was stoned, he is called a Hellenistes in the so-called New Testament. And then you have Gentiles, right, who are called Hellen, they're called ethnos, right? They're called Gentiles in various different ways throughout the New Testament, right? And the individuals who Paul and other apostles were sent to were these Hellenized Israelites, regardless of whether they were Southern Kingdom or Northern Kingdom. Now we know by and large, Northern Kingdom, after the Assyrian exile, they made their way over to Arsareth, which we would say is modern day America, right? The Americas, right? However, there was a remnant of them that still remained. We read about Anna from the tribe of Asher in the so-called New Testament, right? So you had a remnant of Northern Kingdom that were living in and around the Levant, the Holy Land. Very important to pay attention to, right? So now, let's go back real quick. So, Brother Mayash, if you could read the highlighted portion. This is from Josephus's complete works, okay?
Khan says to make. Sloppy, let me enlarge this.
Start at but now.
But now, am I lagging? Cool.
You good?
All right. It says, but now, when the king was acquainted with Varus's design, which was to cut off Jews of Caesarea, being many ten thousands with their wives and children, and all in one day, he called to him Aquiculus, Modius, and sent him to be Varus's successor, as we have elsewhere related. But still, Philip kept possession of the citadel of Gamala and of the country adjoining to it, which thereby continued in their allegiance to the Romans.
Right. So why did I bring this out? Right. Because again, our brothers made it seem as if this was just a Greek city, right? There's no way that he could have been a Jew. There's no way that Cornelius could have been a Jew, right? And I'm going here to show you from a first-hand eyewitness, Flavius Josephus, right, who's a Levite, okay? And he's a respected historian who lived in the land of Israel, right, during the times of the life and times of Christ, and also during the first Roman Jewish wars, right, and afterwards. So he's attesting to the fact that in Caesarea, which was originally a Canaanite Phoenician city, was then conquered by the Hasmoneans, which are Israelites, all right? Then under the Romans, of course, Herod gets control over Judea. He's the king. And he begins to what? Do a bunch of expansion. Now, Herod is known for doing a lot of architectural works, right? The temple mounts that we see in the land of Jerusalem today, right? Herod expanded that. Herod also expanded the temple, right? There's a plethora of architectural feats that were done during the reign of Herod, right? And there's a lot of course, Roman influence. He built Caesarea as a pagan city, right? If we go back here, right? This is the amphitheater. This is Roman. This was built by Herod. Did he actually build it? No. The same way Solomon didn't physically build the temple, right? There's a temple to Augustus, right? This was a pagan city, right? So just think about the climate. You have Jews who are devout, who keep the Torah, right? Who are living there, right? And primarily you had a bunch of rich ones living there too, right? They, right, are living amongst Hellenized Syrians, right? So now, we can go. I'll read this, right? So this is from Jewish Community at Caesarea in Late Antiquity by Robert Lindley Van, right? This is from a paper, and it says this aspect is illustrated. Actually, let me find the actual PDF on my computer so I'm not trying to squint and read this. Give me 1 second, family. Okay, cool. So it says, what do I have here? Okay, this aspect. So it says, where do I want to go? Okay, cool. It says, now the beginning of this goes into the history that I brought out about Caesarea, right? How it was founded, how it was originally a Phoenician a colony, right? The Hasmoneans take over it. Herod comes on the scene, and all that good stuff, right? So it says this aspect is illustrated by an incident recorded in the Jerusalem Talmud, right? And the source is Sota 7:1-21b. It says Rabbi Levi, the son of Hitta, came to Caesarea and heard voices reciting the Shema in Greek. So you had Hellenistes there as well, right? You had Hellenistes, which were Greek-speaking Jews. These are Jews who, of course, are still within Jewry, but they also speak Greek. Another example would be someone like Stephen. He was a Greek-speaking Jew. I believe Stephen, if I'm not mistaken, is from Antioch. I forget. But anyway, right? It says he wanted to stop them. So-called Rabbi Yossi learned of this and became angry. He said to Rabbi Levi, "Am I to understand that he who does not know how to read in Hebrew should not read it at all? Rather, he should fulfill his obligation by reading it in any language he knows." Right? So this story is revealing, for it indicates that at least some Jews in the city were able to recite one of the most important Jewish prayers in Greek only. It should be noted, moreover, that the people gathered in the Caesarean synagogue were in no way estranged from the Jewish tradition, right? Listen to that term, estranged, right? That word's going to come up again in the presentation. The source reports that they were praying. If they recited the Shema in Greek, probably the same was the case for the rest of the prayer service, including perhaps the reading of the Torah. The existence of Greek-speaking Jewish communities at Caesarea is confirmed by the synagogue inscriptions. All those which can be identified with certainty as Jewish are in Greek, as are the names of donors mentioned in the inscriptions: Theodorus, Olympus, Matrona, Berolus, Justus, Mariota, Julius, Julius or Julius, right? So you have not, and for the record, Julius is not a Greek name, it is a Latin name, right? So you have Israelites, Jews who spoke Greek, probably also spoke a little Latin, has a Latin name like Julius. Even a connotation from the Bible appears to have been taken from the Greek translation. Caesarea thus provides a striking example of the process of Hellenization taking place throughout Palestine in late antiquity. The degree of Hellenization of Jews of this period has long been debated. Some have assumed that Hellenization was widespread, others have minimized its impact, while others have adopted a middle position. Today, there can be little doubt that Hellenistic culture in one form or another penetrated deeply into large segments of the Jewish community, as seen in the Beth Sheraim necropolis, which is a late 2nd to 4th century. It says where almost 80% of the inscriptions are in Greek, or at the synagogue in Tiberias, where's Tiberias in Israel, right? Where 10 to 12 inscriptions are in Greek, right? Let's see, give me 1 second. So you guys can't see everything that's on here, right? That I just read, but when you guys get the PDF, this source title right here, it's a link to this source, okay? So you guys can read that. Now, key Hellenic institutions. If you can get me First Maccabees chapter 1 and verse 13, right? We have what's known as the gymnasium, right? When we look at the word gymnasium, right? Etymologically, it means place of naked exercise, right? That's what gymnasium means, place of naked exercise, right? So in the Hellenization of the Levant, of Egypt, of Syria, of Asia, right, going as far as to the Indus River Valley, right, after the conquest of Alexander the so-called Great, right, these are the Hellenic institutions, right? And of course, the Jews, all right, fall under. Shout out to my good brother, all right, my good brother, right, Yahawashi from Ram Gadol Gabarium, right? This brother right here, me and him have been going back and forth for the last week or so, bro. This brother sent me a bunch of sources, right? So shout out to this brother, and I'm gonna let y'all know which sources that this brother put me on to. This brother right here is one of the premier historians in the community, right? Facts. I stamp that, right? So shout out to that good brother, right? Show my Yasharahla if you can get First Maccabees 1 and 13.
Yep, I'm here. It says, this is First Maccabees chapter 1, verse 13. Then certain of the people were so forward herein that they went to the king, who gave them license to do after the ordinances of the heathen.
To do after the what?
Whereupon they built a place of the ordinances of the heathen. Right, verse 14. Whereupon they built a place of exercise at Jerusalem.
A place of exercise
of the heathen.
So the place of exercise is the gymnasium, right? After the custom of the heathen, right? Read on.
Verse 15. And made themselves uncircumcised.
And made themselves what?
Uncircumcised.
So they made themselves uncircumcised, right? So I told you, pay attention to the word stranger, estranged, alienated. Pay attention to the word uncircumcised. Pay attention to these terms as we go through the presentation, right? Read on.
Right, just for some of y'all that didn't catch, right, bro, already pointed out that, you know, Cornelius was noted to be uncircumcised.
Absolutely.
That went over your head.
Yep. So Cornelius was uncircumcised. Read on.
It says again, verse 15, and made themselves uncircumcised and forsook the holy covenant and joined themselves to the heathen.
And joined themselves to the heathen. They forsook the holy covenant. Read on. You got a little bit of a lag out.
That's a lot.
But y'all get the point, right? So we read this very clearly, right? We had Jews, Israelites, who made themselves uncircumcised, right? When you go into some of the history, right, these niggas were actually getting a surgery to put foreskin back on, right? Some sources state, right? But then when we also read further in First Maccabees, the first chapter, we see how they literally murdered, unalived our children who were circumcised because they made it unlawful for us to keep our customs under Antiochus Epiphanes IV, right? So by way of assimilation through just wanting to be like the heathen or through fear, many Israelites became Hellenized, right? And some of these major Hellenic institutions, right? You have the gymnasium, and with the gymnasium, you have this thing called ephebia or ephebion, right? Now, an ephebos, right, is a term for a young man, usually between the ages of 18 and 20, right? And these ephebion, which were these schools, right, where they would have to exercise and they would learn how to get into combat, things of that nature, right? These were seen as finishing schools. By the 1st century BCE, they were reserved for young men educated, all right, for young men, right? And then they were educated in what? Military. Very important to understand, right? Amongst the Hellenic world, right? Amongst the world in which the Greeks influenced people, you had young men in these different towns who were Hellenized, who took part in these institutions, going to the gymnasiums and doing naked exercising, right? They were also part of they were Ephebos, and they were in this institution known as a Phebion, where they would get trained in the military, philosophy, and literary studies. Now, this is important, right? And like I said, I'm going to do a lesson on Acts the 17th chapter, and this lesson is going to tie into it, right? Okay, so now let's continue. Now, additionally, after the first year in the Ephebion, right, the Ephebi, which were the young men, upon review of their skills, they received a sword, a shield, a chlamys, which is a cloak, and a petasos, right, or a hat. Let's get 2 Maccabees chapter 4, verse 10.
Okay. 2nd Maccabees, chapter 4, verse 10.
Again, let's get these likes up. Let's share the video, right? There should be more brothers and sisters in here, right? Getting this information, right? This is valuable information here for the community.
Am I still lagging?
Now you go right now.
All praises. All right, this is 2nd Maccabees, chapter 4, verse 10. Which when the king had granted, and he had gotten into his hand the rule, he forthwith brought his own nation to Greekish fashion.
Read on.
Verse 11. And the royal privileges granted of special favor to the Jews by the means of John, the father of Eupolemus.
Yeah.
Who went ambassador to Rome for amity and aid. He took away, and putting down the governments which were according to the law, he brought up new customs against the law.
Brought up new customs against the law, right? Read on.
For he built gladly a place of exercise under the tower itself.
So they in Jerusalem, they built a gymnasium, a place of exercise. Read on.
Right? Built a place of exercise under the tower itself, and brought the chief young men under his subjection, and made them wear
the chief young men. Who were the chief young men? These were the upper stratums of society, right? The highest of the high, right? So people who were rich, right? He brought under the chief young men under his influence. Read on. And made them wear a what?
Under his subjection, and made them wear a hat.
Made them wear a hat. That word for hat in the Greek manuscript for 2nd Maccabees is this word patassos, right? Now, this is an image, right? This is this hat, right? It's a brimmed hat, right? It was usually made out of straw, right, or felt, right? And it had like this, like decorative, like a strap, right? So you could like take it off and like just have it on your back, all right? And they also used to have like some type of crown situation, right? And guess who this is? These are images of the so-called Greek god Hermes, right? Wearing said hat, right? So this was pagan. All right, this is pagan. So again, we went into gymnasium, what the etymology of the word is, right? Now, this is a source, right? And this source is called, I'll tell you in a second. Okay, so this is Appendix O, the rise of Antiochus IV Epiphanes and his assault against Judea by Dr. J. Paul Tanner, right? Now, my good brother Deacon said he respects scholars, right? So this guy's a doctor, right? This guy is a doctor, right? And he says some things about what the hell is going on. He says some things about what's going on in this time period, right? So now, right, if we see right here on the screen, this is from page, I believe this is page 173, right? So let's read. So I'm going to start from where it says the Greek influence, right? So it says the Greek influence was felt upon Judea, of course, long before Antiochus IV came to the throne. Nevertheless, he was a devoted patriot of the Hellenistic philosophy and sought to spread it throughout his empire. Devotion to Hellenistic philosophy was often centered in the matter of Greek education and the gymnasia in which it was cultivated. Okay, Cherikova, who we're going to get into this guy in a bit, right? He's another scholar. Let's see if our good brothers respect these scholars. Cherikova comments, the citizen educated his son in the municipal educational institutions, the gymnasion, and the ephebeion, which were the very embodiment of the spirit of Hellenism. Here the young citizens received their Hellenic education, developed their strength and agility by physical exercise, and learned poetry and music. And if such an education was not imposed on the citizens as an absolute duty, no one deliberately avoided it, right? So, but there's certain places, right, in certain times in which, when you have Hellenism coming on, right, where you have people who are already adopting this, right? When I go into this book by Cherakova, right, there's places in this book where he talks about how there were a plethora of Greek cities in the Levant already, where you had Israelites living, right? Now he's saying this happened, this influence came before Antiochus came and made it mandatory, right? So people were already doing this, right? This is happening for years. It says the gymnasia became the symbols of Hellenism as a whole. The gymnasiarch, the citizen upon whom they have been imposed the conduct of the gymnasium and the satisfaction of the monetary requirements, was regarded by the citizens as one of the most honored men in the city. At first, the Hellenistic tendencies did not appear too threatening to Judaism, and many citizens saw value in the Greek education. Nevertheless, in time, the attachments of Hellenization came to be a severe problem and led to great conflict between Hellenizers and the conservative figures within Judaism. It goes on to say, in the first third of the 2nd century BCE, a group of Hellenizing Jews came to power in Jerusalem. They were led by a wealthy Jewish aristocrat such as Joseph, son of Tobiah, right? So this guy whose name is son of Tobiah, right? Him and his family, they are known as the Tobiads, right? Then you have, within this time period, you have Onias III. He becomes high priest, right? Onias and his family, they're known as the Onaids, right? So let's continue. It goes on to say, and his son Hyrcanus, who were apparently attached to the externals of Hellenism. Their Hellenization was at first primarily social rather than cultural and religious. Jason, the high priest, carried his Hellenizing to the extent of establishing Greek educational institutions, the gymnasium and the Ephebion, in the founding Jerusalem as a Greek city, known as Antioch at Jerusalem. But Jason, as was only a moderate Hellenizer compared to Menelaus, whose succession as high priest occasioned a civil war between factions, with the Tobiads supporting Menelaus and the masses of the people standing behind Jason. As the scholars Bickerman, Cherakova, and Hengel have shown, it was the Hellenizers, notably Menelaus and his followers, who influenced Antiochus Epiphanes to undertake his persecutions of Judaism as to put down the rebellion to the Hasidians, who were supported by the masses of Jerusalem and who rebelled against the Hellenizers, right? So again, what we're seeing is a bunch of raccoonery going on amongst Israelites against Jews in that day, right? Now, this source, again, you see right here, it has at the bottom that if you click on this, once I put the presentation in the chat, you'll be able to click and go directly to this source so you can read the whole thing for yourself, right? So now, let's talk about this book, right? And guys, I have this book right here in front of me, right? I've had this book for years. I brought out one piece of information from this book in various times, right, when debating a specific topic. And it's the topic of, well, who are these Greeks, these Gentiles that Paul is writing to, right? Now, let's go over the credentials of Mr. Cherakova. So first and foremost, Victor Cherakova, he's a doctor, right? He got a PhD. This guy is a small hat. He's a 1948er, right? Even though he moved to Israel in 1925. So he was born in St. Petersburg, Russia in 1894. He moved to Berlin during the Russian Revolution. He moved from Berlin, Germany, to Israel in 1925. He became a founding faculty member at the Hebrew University, and he was named head of the Department of Classics and History in 1955. If I'm not mistaken, I believe this guy died in 1958, right? So he is a small hat, right? And before we dive into this, right, I'm going to just go to a cup. There's a bunch I have to read in this book, family, right? So give me 1 second. Let me just grab some water. This is going to be a very thorough presentation through the spirit and power Yahawashi and Yahawashi, right? Whew. All right, let's get into it. So this is from his book. This is chapter 2, right? This is in section 2. So right, here's a part 1 and here's a part 2, right? This is from chapter 2, and the title of the chapter is Jewish Community in Greek City, right? So it goes on to say, scattered and dispersed among the nations, the Jews could maintain their existence and national features only as long as the organization of their internal life was of sufficient strength to serve as a barrier against the influence of the alien environment. The Jews were not facing this question for the first time in their history, for the Babylonian exile had already tested their national strength. We do not know how the Jews solved the problem of internal national organization in Babylon, but it is clear that they found the correct solution. For not only did their strength suffice them to send repatriates to Palestine, right? Whenever you hear Palestine, it's talking about the land of Israel, right? Then mind you, this guy, this the one that I have right here, this is the reprint from, I believe, 1999. So this was published in 1959 originally, right? The edition I'm reading right here was a reprint in 1999. Okay, but this gentleman, Mr. Cherakova, he died in 1958, I believe, right? Anyway, it goes on to say, they sent repatriates to Palestine and to reconstitute their national life in their home country, but they were able to preserve their national identity in the exile too, and to bring about the blossoming of Babylonian Judaism in the Talmudic period, right? I was going to say a small colony of the Jews in Elephantine, which lived in independent life in the remote corner of Egypt, also discovered the correct solution, right? So I'm going to jump down to the next paragraph on page 297. It reads, theoretically, the Jewish community was open to every Jew who had come from another country to settle in the place where that community existed. But the continual emigration, right? To immigrate is to come to a place. Emigration is to leave a place, right? So the emigration from Palestine or from the land of Israel, it says, which caused the flourishing of the communities in various countries, also caused the division in the community itself, right? Because you have these waves of immigrants, right, emigrating from Palestine, right? And this is the age-old tale of immigration, right? Even here, look at American history. The first wave of immigrants, right, once they've been here for a generation or two, for a couple of generations, they look down on the newcomers. This is just human nature, right? And we understand how the Israelites have a problem with what? Keeping the laws of God, right? Vexing the stranger, right? Vexing the sojourner, right? So it goes on to say, it says, which caused the flourishing of the communities in various countries, also caused the division in the community itself. The civic status of the Jews in the Greek world was not the same for all members of the community. Those that had come first enjoyed certain rights, while the new immigrants were looked upon as foreigners. Within the community existed aristocratic groups, which we just read about, which constituted the upper stratum of society, and side by side with them, the broad sections of the population, including chiefly those immigrants who had arrived later. Sometimes several communities existed in one city. So you had Jews, right? And then you have, as we're going to read on, Jews who said, man, bump being a Jew, right? Bump following the ways of my ancestors. And we read about this in the book of First Maccabees, right? First and Second Maccabees. So it goes on to say, within the community existed aristocratic groups which constituted for the upper stratum of society, and side by side with them the broad sections of the population, including chiefly those immigrants who had arrived later. Sometimes several communities existed in one city, the reason for whose separateness from one another cannot be determined. These divisions and disputes within the community did not, however, affect the existence of the community itself, and probably no single Jew remained outside of the bounds of its organization, except those who had voluntarily, again, I'll read it again, those who had voluntarily excluded themselves from the generality and had abandoned both the Jewish community and Judaism in order to become assimilated among the Greeks. Hellenizing Jews of this type were to be found in every locality, and we have no means of determining their number. We shall see further that Hellenization did not make departure from the Jewish community obligatory, the less so because, as the rule, it would have brought few benefits. The Jews enjoyed many privileges, and it was not always worthwhile giving them up in order to enter Greek society, which was not at all included to welcome Jews readily, right? So, but again, we know our people. Our people love the heathen, right? Get that back in, actually get that in 2 Maccabees, where it says they love the Greek fashions most of all, right? Setting away the honor of their fathers. Right? 2 Maccabees 4 and 10.
Salakia, I was muted.
Actually, jump to verse 15.
10. I think
Jump to verse 15.
15. Yeah. Con. This is the book of 2 Maccabees, chapter 4, verse 15. Not setting by the honors of their fathers, but liking the glory of the Grecians best of all. By reason whereof sore calamity came upon them, for they had them to be their enemies and avengers, whose custom they followed so earnestly, and unto whom they desired to be like in all things.
You see, this is what was going on. And this is in every locality, right? This is all over the place, right? So now I'm going to go prior, right? This is in chapter 1 of this section, right? Man, it's just so much for me to go into, right?
Bring it out.
Man, this is just all so good. So it says, this is on page 287, right? This is going into the political history, right? This is on page 287. This is the third paragraph, right? So it says, the first report of the Jews in Asia Minor, right? Asia Minor would be modern day Turkey, right? And these are all, just notice all of the locations that line up with the Bible, with the so-called New Testament, right? It says, the first report of Jews in Asia Minor belongs to the middle of the 4th century BCE. Clericus, the pupil of Aristotle, related that his master, when he was in Asia Minor between 347 and 345, met a Jew who had come to the seashore from the mountainous regions, and was a Greek not only in speech but also in spirit. Wow. We shall see below that this figure of a learned Hellenizing Jew belongs to the world of immigration. Hence, the historic basis of the meeting between this Jew and Aristotle also collapses. Even were to assume that the Jew from Palestine visited Asia Minor in the middle of the 4th century, this would be no proof that Jewish settlements existed then in those places. Thus, Clericus goes on anecdote, even if we admit is true, concerns the isolated and exceptional case, right? So he's trying to say, I don't know about this, right? But it gets better, right? Watch this. I'm gonna jump to page 288, right? Watch this. This is the second paragraph. It says, it may therefore be accepted as a historical fact that 2,000 Jewish families were transferred from Babylonia to Asia Minor in approximately the years 210 to 205. These families, which settled in Lydia, that's mentioned in the New Testament, and Phrygia, that's mentioned in the New Testament, as military katoikoi, this is a Greek word, right? It says, laid the foundation of the Jewish diaspora in Asia Minor. This diaspora continued to expand with rapidity, meaning fastly, rapidly. And in the time of Simon the Hasmonean, the Roman Council published a proclamation in favor of the Jews, sending it to various lands and to the Greek cities where Jews resided. Among the various localities and regions of the cities of Asia Minor are mentioned, these being Caria, Pamphylia, mentioned in the New Testament, Lycia, mentioned in the New Testament, Halicarnassus, Mendos, Snidus, I believe that's in the Mission of the New Testament, Phaselis, Side, Amisos, in the islands of Delos, Samos, Kos, and Rhodes. Rhodes is mentioned in the New Testament. In the year 62 BCE, Flaccus, the governor of the Roman province of Asia, confiscated Jewish money at Ampemia, Laodicea, right? In Revelations 2 and 3, Yahawashi has John the Revelator write letters to 7 churches. Where? In Asia Minor. Laodicea is one of them, right? Adramatium, Pergamum, Yahawashi has the letters written to them as well. It says, as is related in by Cicero. Josephus cites several documents drafted by Romans from Julius Caesar to Augustus, also resolutions taken by Greek cities which relate to the Jews and mention the Jewish population in the towns of Miletus, that's mentioned in the New Testament, Pergamum, Halicarnassus, Tralles, Laodicea, Sardis, mentioned in the New Testament, and Ephesus, and on the islands of Paros, Delos, and Kos, right? It goes on to say, we can extend this list by information drawn from the books of the New Testament. Smyrna, Philadelphia, Antioch, and Pisidia, Tarsus, and Iconium, and from inscriptions of Phocacia, and Ionia, Magnesia, by Cypros, Iasos, by Miletus, Hierapolis, and Lydia, mentioned in the New Testament, right? Tlos and Lycia. Philo indicates that Jews dwelt even in the remotest places of Asia Minor, in Bithynia and Pontus on the Black Sea coast. Let me get what's that? 2 Peter chapter 1.
Okay. 2 Peter, you want it from the top?
Yep.
This is 2 Peter chapter 1, verse 1. Simon Peter, a servant and apostle of Hamashiach Yahawashi, to them that have obtained like precious faith.
First Peter.
All right. 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 1. Peter, an apostle of Hamashiach Yahawashi, to the strangers scattered throughout Pontus, Galatia, Cappadocia, Asia, and
Bithynia. So I just mentioned Bithynia as being one of these places, and Philo attests to you have Jews in the remotest places of Asia Minor, in Bithynia and Pontus on the Black Sea coast during his time, right? Read verse 2.
Verse 2. Elect.
They're what?
Elect.
They're elect according to the what?
Foreknowledge of God the Father. Through sanctification of the Spirit. Unto obedience and sprinkling.
Unto what?
Unto obedience.
So let's slow down, right? So again, you have in every locality, you have Jews, right? Right. We read in Acts, the 2nd chapter, you have Jews coming from these regions. Cappadocia is mentioned, right? I believe Pontus is also mentioned in Acts 2, right? But in all of these localities, as this doctor, right, states, you have Jews who remained in Jewry and kept their customs, and then you have Jews who voluntarily assimilated amongst the Greeks, right? So he's calling these strangers because why? They were estranged from the communities, right? They're now being called to what? And they're called elect. So God only calls the Israelites the elect, right? And they're elect according to the foreknowledge, meaning who he already knew. And God only ever knew the Israelites. It says of God the Father through sanctification through the Spirit unto obedience, meaning, hey, you got to keep what? The commandments. So when Christians come to the so-called New Testament and think that these apostles are teaching antinomianism, they're sadly mistaken, right? But again, we're putting the cultural and the political context of what was going on the centuries prior to what we see going on in the New Testament, right? Put a 1 in the chat if so far you're following along and this is making sense. You can read on.
So again, verse 2. You hear me?
Yeah.
Verse 2. Elect according to the foreknowledge of God the Father through sanctification of the Spirit unto obedience and sprinkling of the blood of Hamashiach Yahawashi. Grace unto you and peace be multiplied.
So that's it on that, right? Yeah. That's it on that, right? So let's get back to here, right? So I'm still on page 288, right? Going to page 289, right? It goes on to say, in places he says that there was no city of Asia or Syria. Pay attention to Syria, right? Remember, Caesarea, where our good friend Cornelius was living, right? You had a bunch of Syrians living there, and these Syrians were called Greeks. Why? Because Syria, right, was highly Hellenized, right? It goes on and said, there was no city of Asia or Syria which did not contain Jews. Thus, in the course of 200 or 300 years, Jewish settlement spread and expanded over the whole Asia Minor. The Syrian dispersion was no less numerous than that of Asia Minor. Josephus says that here the Jews were more numerous than in any other country because of their proximity to Palestine. The Jews of Syria are alluded to frequently in Talmudic literature. They settled especially in where? Antioch, which attracted foreigners by its size and populousness. It says the beginnings of the Jewish settlement in the city are related by Josephus, who states that the Jews received citizen rights there as early at the time of Seleucus Nicator. We shall see later that this report, he doesn't say that report is reliable, right? But let's continue. It goes on to say, in another passage, Josephus says that the Jewish population of Antioch grew particularly in the days of the kings who followed Antiochus, and he apparently means Antiochus Epiphanes. This information is credible, for the civil war probably caused many inhabitants of Judea to remove to Syria. So now let's jump down. Go here. I'm gonna jump down. It says we have I'm gonna move on to page. Watch this. Okay, watch this. So it says the fact that the Hellenistic this is on page 291. It says the fact that the Hellenistic author Jason, whose narrative was the basis of the second book of the Maccabees, was a native of Cyrene, right? We have Simon of Cyrene who helped Yahawashi carry his cross. He's also mentioned in Acts the 13th chapter, right? It goes on to say that he was a native of Cyrene, and some indication of the high cultural level of the Jewish community in that country. In the Roman period, the Jewish population in Cyrene developed considerable strength, and at the end of the reign of the Emperor Trajan, made its desperate attempt to rebel against Rome, a rebellion which brought destruction not only to the Jewish population of the country, but also to the Jews of Egypt and Cyprus. Now, that's going to be important to pay attention to, right? We're going to hear about the destruction of Jews in Egypt, right? Listen, we're going to get into some crazy history. It goes also to say Jews also reached Greece and Macedonia. In Philo's time, they lived in Thessaly, Boeotia, Macedonia, Aetolia, and Attica, in the towns of Argos and Corinth, as well as in the best places of the Peloponnesus. Likewise, on the island of Euboea, Cyprus, and Crete. Cyprus is very important to understand, right? Shout out to the brother Eliel from the Anointed House of Saints, right? He has a couple videos on his channel going into the tribe of Dan, right? I've been conversing with that brother, and he's working on a more cohesive presentation as well, right? So the tribe of Dan, they had a very small allotment, and they're right on the coast of Israel, right? They had Joppa, right? Joppa was a major trading hub, right? They had, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Dor was part of their land as well. And the Bible tells us that Dan remained in ships because they were traders, right? And they were also known for what? For their paganism, right? They literally take Moses's grandson and makes him their high priest for a pagan god. And this is what the Danites did, right? And of course, through their trading and them going forth, right? They would take over lands. They took over Dor, right? And then they made their way to Cyprus, which is known as Chittim in the Bible, right? They colonized Cyprus. They colonized Crete, and they colonized Sparta. And when we read in the book of the Maccabees, where there's a letter written to the Lacedaemonians, right? Lacedaemon, they're putting their name everywhere, right? Lacedaemon, right? Which is really Lacedaemon, right? We have Macedonia, Macedon, Dan, right? They're putting their names everywhere. The Bible says that they are an adder in the path. An adder is a snake. A snake in a path does what? Leaves a trail. So this is what Dan was doing. When I do the presentation on Acts 17, that's going to play a very crucial role in it, right? What? Shout out to the brother Yahawashi, right? Ezekiel 27:19. Dan also in Javan, going to and fro, occupied in thy fairs, bright iron, Cassia, and calamus were in thy market, right? So we see that the Danites were traders, right? The story of Hercules, that is about Samson. The Danites were crazy pagans. They went around the known world, right? They colonized places all throughout Europe, right? And we're seeing here we got Jews also in all these different Asian places of Asia Minor, right? So where are we? It goes on to say here on page 291 of Hellenistic Civilization and the Jews, it says the Acts of the Apostles mention Jewish communities at Philippi, Thessalonica, Beroea, Athens, and Corinth. In many places in Greece, moreover, inscriptions have been found evidencing Jewish settlements. Two of them discovered at Delphi report the emancipation of Jewish slaves. They belong to the years 170 to 157, which was the period of the Hasmonean revolt, and it was possible that the Jews referred to there were taken prisoners and sold as slaves during the war. The Roman proclamation under Simon Maccabee alludes to the Jews in Sparta, hence the what? The Lacedaemonians. They were in what? Sparta. You look at the Spartans, they're depicted as black. Some of them are depicted as white because what was going on is you had, of course, Esau made his way up in there at some point in time, right? They're just everywhere. And you have Dan, the Lacedaemonians, they're there as well. And we're writing to them in the book of 1st and 2nd Maccabees how we're brothers, right? All praise to the Most High. It goes on to say, the Roman proclamation under Simon Maccabee alludes to the Jews in Sparta, Sicyon, on the island of Crete, in the town of Gortyn, and on the island of Cyprus. The Jews of Cyprus are also mentioned by Josephus in the reign of Cleopatra III of Egypt, and Jewish coins of the Maccabean epoch have been found on the island. These notices show that the Jewish dispersion in Greece was already in existence in the middle and 2nd century BCE, but it was not very important even in the Roman period, and it is hard to imagine that the number of Jews in the lands of the Balkan Peninsula went on growing since the local inhabitants themselves had for generations been rapidly abandoning their native country, which had been progressively impoverished and could no longer hold them even at the end of the classical period, right? It goes on to say, page 292, thus in the course of the Hellenistic period, Jews became dispersed over the whole Greek world. Over the whole Greek world. Now, again, literally a few pages later, right, on page 297, I'm on page 292, he goes in to say that wherever we were, you had Jews who remained in Jewry, right, who remained in the bounds of their organization, right? Again, we had sects at this time, right? And then you had Jews who voluntarily assimilated amongst the Greeks. And these Hellenized Jews, there's no way of knowing how many numbers of them there were in any given locale, right? And just so we can tie it back into Caesarea, Caesarea is a Greek influenced city. It was a heavily Greek influenced city. Its founding is literally founded by a Phoenician, and the Phoenicians were Hellenized. So it already had Hellenism in its inception. Then you had the Hasmoneans, they take over it, right? And of course, now you got Herod, he comes up, and what Herod's doing all over the place, not just in Caesarea, he's building pagan temples. He built a temple to Augustus in Caesarea. So it was heavily Hellenized. And in every place where you had Jews, you had Hellenized Jews in Caesarea, right? Oh man, oh man, oh man. Oh boy. So where am I? Right? Page 292. So it says, thus in the course of the Hellenistic period, the Jews became dispersed over the whole Greek world. As early as 140 BCE, approximately, the author of the Sibylline oracles testifies that the whole land and sea are full of Jews. Strabo's assertion that the Jew had reached every town, and it is hard to find a place in the world where this race has not penetrated and where it was not obtained a hold, refers to the period of Sulla, about the year 85 BCE. Josephus speaks in the same language of the diaspora communities. There is no people in the world among whom part of our brethren is not to be found. Let me read that again. Josephus, a Jew, he says, he speaks in the same language of the diaspora communities. There is no people in the world among whom part of our brethren is not to be found. So when Yahawashi told the apostles, go not into the way of the Gentiles and enter any city of the Samaritans, enter ye not, but go rather to the lost sheep of the house of Israel, right? And then when he gives the Great Commission, he tells them to go all over the world, right? And preach unto them, teaching them what I taught you, that the kingdom is at hand. And the kingdom, by definition, prophetically and biblically, is the children of Israel ruling over all nations with Christ. It's very simple. So when the apostles are talking about all these Gentiles coming in, right, it's now becoming more and more clear to see how they're talking about these Hellenized Jews who are in literally every locality, in every city in the world, in the known world at that time. You had Jews living amongst them. You had Israelites living amongst them, right? Let's continue, right? It goes on to say, and this is in Wars 398, right? It says, elsewhere, he writes, the Jewish race is scattered over the entire world among the local inhabitants. Philo speaks of the wide expansion of the Jews throughout the world and of Jerusalem as the center of that scattered and surrounding nation. The Jewish diaspora, this is the second paragraph, was a considerable power among the indigenous peoples, and it is to be regretted that we are unable to determine the precise number of Jews outside of Palestine. The only writer who has given or thought he had given the overall figure of Jews in the Roman Empire in the reign of Claudius belongs to a very late period, and his information is not to be relied on. He is the Christian often known as Bar Hebraeus, the son of a converted Jew who lived in the 13th century of the Christian era. He speaks of a grand total of 7 million Jews in the empire. This, however, is merely an error on his part, as he was confusing the number of Jews with the number of Roman citizens according to the Roman census made by Claudius in that year, which is 48. And as to the partial figures of Jews of Palestine, of Egypt, preserved by Josephus and Philo, they must be used in great caution, right? Let's see. So the thing is, like, you cannot number us, right? The Bible says that we will be as the sands of the sea and the stars of the sky, right? So I think the point has been made very, very clear with this scholarly source by a doctor, right? A PhD in classics and history, right? A small hat himself, and Dr. Victor Cherakova attesting to there being Jews literally everywhere. And he's getting these sources from Philo as well as Josephus, who are both Jews, right? Who lived in the 1st century AD, right? All praise to the Most High. So now, man, this is what I will do is I found the free PDF of this book. And again, shout out to the good brother Yahawashi for sending me this source. He sent me this source. And I was my flabbers were gasted, right? So this is called Makers of Ancient Strategy from the Persian Wars to the Fall of Rome. This is written by Victor Davis Hanson. He has a bachelor's, a BA in classics from the University of California, Santa Cruz, a prestigious university, and he has a PhD in classics from Stanford University, right? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to read pages. I'll read from pages 172 to 174, right? Watch this. All right. This is all so good. This is all so good, right? But I'm going to start from the bottom, the last paragraph on page 172. It says, consider the situation in Judea before the revolt of 66, when Herod the Great ruled with Roman support until his death in 4 BCE. He had commanded the typical Hellenistic army. Hellenistic, when you see Hellenistic, it's talking about individuals who were Hellenized, right? Typical Hellenistic army of troops from the local military settlements. Now, let's slow this down and let's unpack this. When we took a look at what was going on in the Hellenistic world, right, you had different institutions, right? What are these institutions? You have the gymnasia and you have the ephebeion, which were finishing schools, right? They were for young men and they were educated in military, philosophy, and literal studies, right? Very important to understand. So now, as we continue, let's read that again. It says, consider the situation in Judea before the revolt of 66, when Herod the Great ruled with the Roman support until his death in 4 BCE. He commanded a typical Hellenistic army of troops from the local military settlements. These troops were mainly Samaritans, Edomians, Babylonian, Jewish archers. Actually, let me go ahead. Let me just go ahead and actually share this on the screen.
Let's say, can you share it?
Yeah, watch this. Share screen window. Just so y'all can y'all see it? Oh, praise the Most High. Watch this, right? So it says Jewish archers and ethnic Palestinian Jews, although Herod also had a famous bodyguard of Germans, Thracians, and Gauls. So again, what we're attesting to the fact is that you had Jews in the military. And whose military? In the Roman military. Very, very clear, right? This guy is a PhD. I wonder if my good brothers respect this guy's scholarship, right? Let's continue. It says the indigenous settlements continue to supply the army that supported all of Herod's successors and formed the garrison of Judea after 6 CE. Much of this army remained loyal to the Romans, and much of this army. So you had in this army, you had Jewish archers, you had ethnic Palestinian Jews, right? You had people from Babylon, you had Samaritans, right? You had a bunch of people, right? But Jews are being mentioned here, right? They remained loyal to the Romans and fought with them to suppress the revolt of 66 CE under the command of Herod's his great grandson, King Agrippa II. Conversely, Herod probably modeled his army on the Roman army and used some ethnic Roman officers, and it is likely that many Jews were recruited into the Roman legionary or auxiliary army, both in his reign and later. But Mel Gibson's portrait of Latin-speaking soldiers in The Passion is inaccurate. The soldiers in the Roman garrisons of Judea spoke Aramaic, right? So this is what the guy is saying, right? Mel Gibson was incorrect. It goes on to say, and now why is that important to understand? Because Aramaic was spoken, Hebrew was spoken in this time, right? So it goes on to say the army that the Romans initially sent against the rebels in 66 under the command of Cestius Gallus, who was the governor of Syria, included legionary, i.e. Roman citizen soldiers, auxiliary, i.e. non-citizen, right? So again, you had Jews who became citizens of the Roman Empire, like you have Paul, he's a Roman citizen, and you had Jews that were non-citizens, and they were part of the auxiliary. All right, soldiers contingents from the armies of 2 local allied client kings and the local Syrian militia. The local Syrian militia. Remember what we read that Josephus said? Josephus said what? That there was no city, no town in Syria where there were not Jews. And in every place where there were Jews, you had Jews that remained within the confines of so-called Judaism, meaning keeping the Torah, and you had people who voluntarily follow the customs of the heathen. They were assimilated amongst the Greeks, and in their Greek education, as a young man, you would get military training in the gymnasiums and the amphibians, military training, literary study training, and philosophical training. They wanted to make them well-rounded individuals. This would also include Caesarea, right? Let's continue. It goes on to say, at this time, the royal Jewish forces loyal to Agrippa II moved against the rebels in 3 separate locations. Later, the larger Roman army under the command of Vespasian numbered 55 to 60,000 legionary and auxiliary troops and 15,000 allied troops, and included at least one Jewish high officer, Tiberius Julius Alexander of Egypt. Now, guys, this guy right here, you know how the scripture says Yahawashi is the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords? This guy is the raccoon of raccoons and the boot-licking nigga of all boot-licking niggas. We're going to get some more information on this guy, right? In this example, and in the other that could be discussed from around the empire, it is difficult to distinguish the Romans from their subjects. A procedure made even more complicated because natives, when enfranchised, took Roman names. Let's say that again. They took what? Roman names. Julius, Roman name. Tiberius, Roman name. Cornelius is a Roman name. It's not a Greek name. Took Roman names, right? Let's continue. So they could not be distinguished in the historical record from ethnic Italians. For example, while several of Herod's military officers had Roman names, we do not know if they were enfranchised Jews or soldiers imported or borrowed from Rome's legionary armies. Should we count all Roman citizens as Roman, including King Herod and the successors, and Josephus himself, and all retired auxiliary soldiers, their freemen, their descendants, and the descendants of their freemen? Should Paul of Tarsus, whose family had acquired Roman citizenship from an unknown patron, therefore count as Roman, along with any freedman in his family? Should we rather count only the staff sent from Italy, the procurator of his encounter? Should we count only legionary soldiers? But there were no legions deployed in Judea before the revolt of 66. I'm going to read that again. But there were no legions deployed in Judea before the revolt of 66. One scholar writing on Gaul has described the term Roman as a social status, not an ethnicity, and as such, it was fluid, and one could be more or less Roman or less enmeshed in the web of Roman culture and influence, and there was no sharp line between ruler and subjection, right? Drop some bombs in the chat. Drop some fire emojis in the chat. Shout out to the good brother Yahawashi Bonaparium from Rum Gadol Gabarium for putting your boy on to this incredible scholastic,
drop them bombs,
scholarly source. Okay, so this schmuck right here, we're gonna ban him right? Shooters, anyone talking smack, right? Get these guys up out of here. All right, so see, we got a simpleton in the chat, right? So here's the thing, right? I had a conversation with the good brother Zion Lex last week, right? And I've been meaning to just revisit the conversation that we had, or do a video on it. right? Because during the conversation, I wasn't able to respond to any of the things that he presented, right? So same thing with him, right? And in that conversation, I have a source, and I said, you know what? I'm not going to bring this source out because this source can open a can of worms, right? And it's funny because earlier today, right, as I'm getting prepared for this presentation, I actually slept about 2 hours last night, right? Went to bed around 3 something, woke up around 5, 6 something, right? Had to feed my son, right? Put him to sleep, and I was just up, right? I've probably gotten about maybe 4 hours of sleep over the past 24 hours or so. And as I'm just pondering, right, working on this presentation, also working on other things to combat this nonsense doctrine that's been going on in the community, I was thinking about that source that I had, and I was doing some research on the phrase pos anthropos and the usage of it in various places in the Bible, including the Old Testament. And as I'm doing my research, I came across some very interesting information that I am reluctant to bring out. However, I'm going to bring it out because it has to be brought out, right? Because the issue is Israelites don't know anything about the Septuagint. Niggas want to talk Septuagint. Which Septuagint? Do you know which one? The Septuagint that you have today, is it the same Septuagint that early church fathers had? Is it the same Septuagint that was supposedly circulating during the time of Christ? The answer is no. You'd have no clue what you're talking about, right? So nice try, schmuck, right? But anyway, okay, the brother asked, can I zoom in? All right, all praise, I'll zoom in. Let me make this a little larger. Right? So yeah, this is look at all this amazing information that we just brought out through the Spirit and power of Yahweh shanyam-ishar, right? You had Jews within Herod's army and all of his successors. Herod built what? He built up Caesarea, and he would have took from the locals of that area, which would include Jews, right? And these niggas also took on what? Let's read that again. I just gotta read that again. You gotta deal with the laYAHAWAH. No one's ever called the laYAHAWAH. Shut up, nigga. You don't know what the hell you're talking about, right? So anyway, let's go back, right? So it says, in this example and in others that could be discussed from around the empire, it is discussed to distinguish. It is difficult to distinguish the Romans from their subjects, a procedure made even more complicated because natives, when enfranchised, which would include who? Jews, right? Jewish archers, ethnic Palestinian Jews, right? It would include them, right? They took on Roman names and cannot be distinguished in the historical record from ethnic Italians. For example, while several of Herod's military officers have Roman names, we do not know if they were enfranchised Jews or soldiers imported or borrowed from Rome's legionary armies. We should count all Roman citizens, right? He's asking these great questions, right? But as he goes through these questions, he goes on to say, should we count only legionary soldiers? But hold on, but wait. There were no legions deployed in Judea before the revolt of 66. One scholar writing on Gaul has described the term Roman as a social status, not an ethnicity, and as such, it was fluid and could be a more or less Roman or more or less enmeshed in the web of Roman culture and influence, and there was no sharp line between the ruler and the subject, right? So again, you had Jews who were there in these localities, and what were they doing? Taking Roman names. Hence Cornelius. All right, so this guy, let's put this guy in timeout. You're in timeout. because you just chat way too much, bro. You chat way too much, bro. Right? So amazing source through the spirit and power of Yahweh shanyam-ishar, right? It is the same back then as it is today. There's no new thing under the sun, the Bible says. We have European names and fight in the army in America. My name, my government name is Latin, of Latin origin. Right? I wanted, when I was a kid growing up, I wanted to be in the Air Force. I wanted to be a fighter pilot when I was a kid. Right? I almost dropped out of college, right, and almost joined the Navy. So why? Because there's benefits of being in the Navy. The same way that there were benefits of being in the military under the Romans.
Remember that brother I was talking about?
Huh?
Remember that brother I was talking about?
Yeah.
So this is what he said to me, right? I asked him, guys, this is a brother who's known the truth for 2 years now. He hit me up yesterday. He said he was looking for somebody to give him exempt letters on not shaving, not having to shave his beard in the army. This is a brother. Again, he's known the truth for 2 years now. So I asked him, when did you join the army? This was yesterday after he asked for this exempt. He said, I'm not officially in yet. 2 years in the truth, right? Now we're talking about Israelites, our people are in this joining Esau's army, right? They don't even know they're Israelites. This is an Israelite who knows who he is. He said, I'm not officially in yet. I shipped off January and I wanted to get it done before I got in. So, like I said, I didn't know he was in 2 years. So I'm asking him now. That's the first thing I said. When did you learn of the truth? 2 years ago. Then he sent me a video. I didn't even click on the video. It's an Israelite. It's a camp, right? I said, you shouldn't be joining the army, brother. He said, I'm tired of not having. I want my own land, my own house, like you were just saying. All right, there's benefits of being in the army, but like I said, this is an Israelite, right?
How old is this brother? How old is again? When the brother Mayash hit me up about this because he was asking who should I send him to for the exemption, I told him to hit up the brother Rob from Miami, from down in Miami. Shout out to them brothers, right? I said army. I'm like, why is this nigga in the army? I'm like, what is like? Here's the thing. Where we are today, right? Where America's about to invade Venezuela. America just did strikes. We're in Syria, right? We're on the precipice of World War III, right? And you got an Israelite who's in the truth, right? And he's like, oh, I'm going to join the white man's army. That is the stupidest thing that I can think of, right? And just so you guys understand, right? When we go into, again, I brought out earlier how Josephus attests to tensions between the Syrians and the Jews in Caesarea. And just so we understand, the term Syrian refers to individuals who are from Syria. You had Jews moving around all over the place, right? So if you have a Jew, right, in Syria who becomes Hellenized and assimilated amongst these Syrians who are also Hellenized, right, and they make their way to Caesarea, right, they would be part of what? Of the Syrians. They will be classified as Syrians, right? And they're attested to being Hellenized. There was tension between them and the Jews of Jewry. The same way there's always been tension between Israelites, between brethren, right? So looking at Caesarea specifically, right? And just because Cornelius has a Roman name, right? He could 1000% be an enfranchised Jew, as we just read in this source, right? From that local area. And again, you had Jews literally all over that area. All over. You had niggas up by the Black Sea. Again, you have Jew, You have Hellenistes, you have Helen / ethnos, Goy, Gentile, right? Why? Because if you, and again, he was uncircumcised. According to the law, which we're going to get into, if you're uncircumcised, you're cut off from the people because you broke the covenant. The phrase for cut off in Genesis, the 17th chapter, right, is the Hebrew word kadath, right? And it means to make a covenant, right, and to cut off. When you make a covenant, what do? You have to make a sacrifice. You have to cut animals. So because you're uncircumcised, you do not circumcise your child on the 8th day. That child that's uncircumcised is cut off from the people. He's no longer deemed as part of the people. So if he's not deemed as part of the people, he's not deemed as Israel, right? He's not deemed as Judah, right? Talking about the kingdom of Judah, then what will he be deemed as? As a heathen.
And we see the apostles actually tell our people who are heretics of the truth to treat them like that. And
that's what Yahawashi said, treat him as a heathen man, right? So again, what's going on is brothers are bugging out over their misunderstanding of Paul, and Peter lets you know what that Paul writes things that are some things hard to be understood, right? They're misunderstanding what the apostles are doing. Again, the apostles are simply hastening the day because they believe that they're getting delivered within their time frame. That's no slight on them, but they apply prophecies to their situation, thinking, oh yeah, this got to be the fulfillment of it. And it was not. They have yet to be fulfilled. And that was pointed out in my peer review, right? So we see here very clearly, right, how you had Israelites, Jews who were in Herod's army. And Herod did a lot of his ruling in Caesarea. Caesarea was seen more so as like the administrative hub of the land, of that province under the Roman rule, right? Very important to bring out, right? Shout out to the good brother Benjamin Direwolf. Shout out to you, King, right?
Jersey's finest, right? You can't even say that, to be fair to the brother, because again, this is a brother who known the truth for 2 years. So he should have never signed a contract. He should have never even signed up. Right. Yeah. So that prison time right there, you know, I have no pity for you because you knew very well better than do something so stupid.
Yeah, that was dumb, right? Listen, brothers, this is not the time to try to go to the military just so you can get a goddamn Hellcat or Camaro, right? In your so-called own land. You don't have your own land in America. There's this thing called eminent domain where they can take your land.
Right, exactly.
I'm from Brooklyn, right? When I was growing up, I went to Bishop Lockwood Memorial High School, right? Downtown Brooklyn, you have Atlantic Terminal. Across from Atlantic Terminal, you have now the Barclays Center. For the Barclays Center to be built, there were condos that people owned that were there. Eminent domain took their property, took their land. You don't own anything here. You are a slave. This is not our rest. But guess what? We seek for a better country, right? We won't have our own land. We won't be taxed by the heathen. Us being taxed is captivity, right? We see that during Ezra and Nehemiah, right?
Yahawashi said that to Peter.
Yep. Listen. Do kings tax who they subject, or do they tax their own? Great question, right? So again, prime example of how it's no new thing under the sun, and how our people were just being silly, right? And joining the military for the so-called benefits, right? We're gonna get into Tiberius in a second, right? I want to bring out brought that out. All right, I want to bring out another source, right? Two more sources real quick. And these are all good sources. Actually, I got a few sources. Watch this. So when you understand and you look at the title of centurion, right? A centurion was a non-commissioned position. The legionaries, that was a commissioned position, right? So right here, this is called Roman Legions. This is by forget this gentleman's name, H.R. Parker, right? So the centurions were drawn from 5 main sources. They might be men promoted from the ranks who had held some minor posts under the centurionate, or they might more rarely gain their promotion after service in the auxiliary unit. 2 inscriptions will suffice to illustrate these 2 modes of approach to the centurion, right? I'm not going to read this right here. Jump down, right? So right here on page 200 of this book, it says, the remaining 3 sources from which the centurionates were drawn were, however, the most common. Sometimes they came from a class whose property qualifications was below that of the equestrian order, right? So you have the Senate order, right? You have classes in ancient Rome. You have the Senate order, and right underneath that, you have the equestrian order. Like, these are the highest levels of Roman society, right? Equestrian order, and received their posts in the legion as a reward for merit. These men were often magistrates from a municipal town who had in this way secured complete Roman citizenship. Thus, they became eligible for legionary service and were appointed centurions in recognition of their previous careers, right? An inscription of the time of Hadrian describes certain Marcius Celer, all right? And it goes on to that, right? So just to show you what was going on, how you became a centurion, right? So now, I read this source, right? So now this is called Sons of Israel in Caesar's Service, Jewish soldiers in the Roman military. Again, we're just beating a dead horse, demonstrating how you had Jewish soldiers, right, in the Roman military. This is going on. Oops. There you go. So of course, you see they mentioned Tiberius Julius Alexander, which we'll get into him in a second, right? It says, in the year 69, the Roman province of Judea was consumed by a 3-year rebellion that pitted Jewish zealots against the authority of the emperor and the house of Herod. Not only was the revolt the stabilizing factor in the eastern regions of the empire, but it also posed a significant challenge for the new emperor Vespasian. In order to quell the Jewish revolts, in his eastern marches, Vespasian resolved to send an army under the command of his son Titus, with explicit orders to crush the insurrection, right? So we're going to come back to this, right? Let's go here, right? And let's talk about this guy, Tiberius Alexander, right? Tiberius Julius Alexander. So he's born to a wealthy Jewish family in Alexandria, Egypt. He is the nephew of renowned philosopher Philo. His brother married Bernice, which is the daughter of Agrippa. He was part of the equestrian Roman class, right? Which is like second. So think about it like this, right? In America, we got the 1%, the ultra billionaires, and then we got the centimillionaires, right? People who have their net worth is like hundreds of millions of dollars as opposed to billions of dollars, right? So they're right under there, right? Second, this is his level, right? He became the second procurator of Judea from 46 to 48 AD. Then he became the prefect of Rome, of Roman Egypt, right, from 66 to 69 AD. He led his legions against Alexandrian Jews during racial tensions. When I said that this nigga is the raccoon of raccoons and the bootlickers of bootlickers, here's your guy. This is a Jew. This is actual Israelite. He's appointed second in command by Emperor Vespasian under Titus Vespasian, and he participated in the siege of Jerusalem and the burning of the temple in 70 AD. Drop a bomb in the chat. So you mean to tell me a nigga who's essentially think of him as a general. He is second in command to Titus Vespasian. This is a Jew. He's the nephew of Philo, a known Jew of Alexandria. He led his legion to murder his own people in Alexandria during racial tensions. And then, so not only this, right? Because of his status, This guy right here was influential in Titus Vespasian's rise. Titus Vespasian was not the son of the previous Caesar, right? He took power as a general, right? And this guy helped him do so. And then Titus Vespasian said, you know what? We got, this nigga stepping on shit, right? He's stepping on his own people. Let's send his ass to Judea, right? And have him participate in squashing this rebellion of these goddamn Jews in Judea. And put these niggas down. That's what was going on, right? So let's go back to this source, right?
So like you said, nothing new under the sun. That's like Jason and Melanus, who went against the Maccabee brothers.
Absolutely, right? No new thing under the sun, right? So let's get into it, right? So it says, although the emperor's young son showed exceptional talent and a tact for leadership, he lacked the military experience deemed necessary for a Roman general. Therefore, the emperor was forced to choose an able commander capable of assisting Titus in the Judean expedition. A great number of prestigious military men were available for the post, according to Annius Vinicianus, son-in-law to the famed general Corbulo. But Vespasian made the unlikely choice of an Alexandrian Jew named Tiberius Julius Alexander to spearhead the Roman army in its effort to thwart the Jewish uprising. The emperor's decision was to prove fortuitous, as not only did Tiberius Alexander coordinate a Roman victory in Judea, but he also became Titus's trusted advisor and may have eventually reached the rank of Praetorian prefect. So this is like
this nigga,
top guy. Despite the outstanding military career of this Alexandrian Jew, his name and his legacy are largely unknown outside of the small circle of specialists like Wise and likewise. The participation of Jews in the Roman military is a topic that is underemphasized or frankly ignored by historians. Most often, scholars quote the exemptions from military service granted to Jews at Ephesus and Delos, or elaborate on the difficulties of that Sabbath observance and dietary laws posed to Jewish men interested in serving under the imperial flag. And here's the thing, they're not putting into account the fact that, guess what, guys? You have in every location Jews everywhere. And in these locations, you have Jews who remained in Jewry, who remained down with the home team, and you had bootlicking, raccoon ass niggas who said, man, I love doing what these Greeks do. Right? I just got finished watching the Diddy documentary on Netflix. Diddy was a freak bull, right? Listen, niggas was in the goddamn gymnasiums working out naked around other niggas, wrestling and shit. That's wild pause, right? And freaky ass niggas, right? You got freaky frog ass niggas like you know who, you know what I mean? He that shall remain nameless, right? Niggas like that back then was having grand old freak offs. Paul talks about in Romans 1 how God gave them up to vile affections. Niggas just love being freaky like the Greeks. Forget freaky Zeke, freaky Greeky. Niggas was freaky Greeky back then. This is what was going on. Right? There's more heat in this book. I haven't even cracked the surface. We would be here all day if I read all the things I got highlighted in this. Right? But a centurion can't be an Israelite. He can't be an Israelite. He's from the Italian man. Oh, Caesarea was a Greek city. No shit, Sherlock. Right? And as we dive into the scriptures, right, when we dive into and harmonize the scriptures truthfully with the proper political landscape of what was going on leading up to the Roman period, during the Roman period, and leading up to the revolt of 66 AD and the destruction of our temple. Listen, guys, the climax of all of that a nigga who's a Jew was responsible for the siege of Jerusalem and the burning of our temple, the murder of our people, the enslaving of our people, the raping of our women, and the stealing of our holy vessels being shipped over to Rome, right? You have what's known as, and listen, Malak Eleazar, right? This book right here is not expensive.
Yeah, it's on Amazon. I just ordered it.
It's not expensive at all. I got this book for less than $20 years ago. And guess what, guys?
Yeah,
I never read the book. I only used it and brought it out for that one page. The first page I read about how in every Greek location you had Jews everywhere, right? And how amongst them you had Jews that voluntarily became Hellenized amongst the Greeks. I only ever brought it out for that, right? But as I started reading more of this book, treasure trove of information that the community needs to understand. This is crucial to understanding what was going on in the times of the apostles, in the times of Yahawashi. Guys, I pretty much, out of this book, I read about places that the Bible talks about in the New Testament, where Paul is going, where the apostles are going, right? Listen, I'm not ashamed of the gospel, right? To the Jew first and also to the Greek, right? Because guess what? When we go out to the highways, right now, I'm educating and I'm edifying the Jews, right? When we go to the highways and hedges, right, we go to edify and gather the Greeks, our people, right? Guys, some of y'all may have been following me for some time. Some of y'all may be new, right? My old channel got deleted, got clipped early this year, and had a video on why I denounced Alpha Phi Alpha. I went to college. I pledged Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, the Mighty Psi chapter, right, in spring of 2013. I was a literal Greek. A literal Greek. Walked around with Greek letters on my chest, right? Pledged for 9 weeks, right? Pledged other people, right? I did a video that was on my old channel where I was going into the ritual books of various Pan-Hellenic council organizations, right? The so-called Divine Nine is known as the Pan-Hellenic Council. Pan-Hellenic. Pan means across, Hellenic, Greek. Pan-Hellenic Council, right? For instance, Kappa Alpha Psi. I ain't gonna lie, I hated them niggas when I was in the world. Them niggas, I got a hold of these niggas' ritual book. These niggas literally in their ritual create a Delphic shrine. A Delphic shrine. I forget which Greek god was it in worship of, but yet you have pastors. For instance, Pastor Eric Mason. Right. Pastor Eric Mason of Epiphany Fellowship is a member of Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated. When I was pledging, right, my ADP, my assistant dean of pledges, took me and my line brother down to DC for, I believe it was either Howard's homecoming. Yeah, it was Howard's homecoming, right? While we were online, but he brought us down there because he wanted to go down there. We had to drive him, right? And we went to church. We went to this church called it was in Alexandria, Virginia, right? Have a lot of affluent black folk that live in Alexandria, and I forget the name of the church, but it was something Street Baptist Church, and the pastor was a member of Kappa Alpha Psi. You have a lot of so-called pastors who are members of Pan-Hellenic Black Greek letter organizations. My pastor growing up, I went to St. Paul's Community Baptist Church in East New York, Brooklyn, right? And the pastor's name was Dr. Johnny Ray Youngblood, right? He was an alpha from he went to some school down in Mississippi, right? So you have pastors, so-called pastors, who are members, who are Greeks. And there's no new thing under the sun. So when we go to the highways and hedges, we go to preach the gospel to our people who are not in the knowledge of self. They're Greeks, right? Paul and Barnabas, they were doing the same thing. They were going to they were going to the synagogues, preaching the gospel to the Jews, right? Some of them believed, Some of them did not, right? So you had the Hellenistes, which were Greek-speaking Jews. Some of them believed, some of them did not. In various instances in the book of Acts, we see how it's the Hellenistes, right, who were causing a turmoil and getting them kicked up out of the city, right? And they were going to all these places that were just mentioned here, where you had Jews everywhere, there's synagogues everywhere, and in these places you got Israelites, Jews, who no longer were keeping the customs. They completely alienated themselves from the commonwealth of Israel, from Jewry, from Judea. And this is what Paul is talking about, and this is who he's talking to. He's not talking to white people. Edomites are not getting salvation. Edomites are going into chains, and the Edomites are getting bun up. Thus saith the Lord, right? So now, right? There we go there, right? That's enough on that. Actually, no, let's continue. It says, when the issues of Jewish service of the Roman army is addressed, it is not without a certain degree of skepticism, and the Roman Jews in imperial service are often cast in the light of renegades or apostates, right? Now, this right here is from a, this guy right here is, oh, what's the face? What is this guy? This guy, Kenner, he is a theologian, right? When I looked him up, he has some good accreditations, right? He is Craig S. Kenner is his name, right? He's an American Wesleyan theologian, right? Wesleyan has to go into like the Methodist theology, right? He's a biblical scholar and professor of the New Testament at Asbury Theological Seminary, right? So this individual, he studied at Central Bible College, now part of Evangel University. He graduated with a Bachelor of Arts in 1982. Then he studied theology in the Assemblies of God Theological Seminary, right, and earned a master's degree in 1982 and a Master of Divinity in 1987. He also studied at Duke University in New Testament and Christian origins, and has a Doctor of Philosophy that he got in 1991, right? So right here in his scholarly article, right, he says here, this is on page, this would be page 168, right? He goes on to say, it says, literary evidence indicates that in most of the early first century, Caesarea had a cavalry unit of 5 infantry cohorts and auxiliaries. Archaeological evidence also attests to an increasing Roman presence and influence. Soldiers were certainly stationed there after this period. During the latter governorship of Felix, Jews provoked Syrians in Caesarea. Josephus talks about this. The Syrians had less wealth than the Jews in Caesarea, but counted on connections with the soldiers stationed there. Most of them were from either Caesarea or Sebaste. Now, Caesarea and Sebaste are technically the same thing, right? Conflict escalated, and when the Jewish side refused to desist, Felix set his soldiers against the crowd and let them plunder the homes of well-to-do Jewish citizens. In times of conflict, the Roman auxiliaries in Caesarea were mainly Syrian, would side with the local Syrians against the Jews. Now, again, Josephus also lets us know that you had a plethora of Jews living in Syria, that most Jews living outside of Palestine, living outside of the land of Israel, lived where? In Syria, right? It says, so again, you have these Hellenized Jews, you have regular Jews. These regular Jews, they're more affluent, blah, 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 right? So if you think about the brother that we just talked about, right? I'm tired of not having my own. So what do? Right. You go and you join what? The military, right? From this, we may gather that within no more than 3 decades of Cornelius' encounter with Peter, the majority of the Gentile soldiers in Caesarea were anti-Jewish, or at least would prove pro-Syrian if a conflict between the two groups arose. They also had local ties, right? Most relevantly, an explicit passage in Josephus describes Gentile soldiers already stationed in Caesarea at the close of Agrippa's rule. Many soldiers in Caesarea and Sebaste during Agrippa's time hated Agrippa, but were nearly relocated after his death, but were allowed to remain, being very attached to the locale. In Josephus' account, Caesarea and Sebaste ungratefully rejoined at Agrippa's death, or rejoiced at Agrippa's the first's death. The numerous soldiers were went to his house and carried out images of his daughter, which they then abused on the top of brothel houses. So that was crazy, right? They took pictures of his daughter and was doing some salacious things. I wonder where they learned that stuff from. Right? The Emperor Claudius was angry at the report of this and ordered Fadus to go there and punish Caesarea and Sebastian for their insult both to the deceased Agrippa and to his living daughter. He then ordered the soldiers in Caesarea and Sebastian to be removed to Pontus, being replaced by Roman legionnaires stationed in Syria. Nevertheless, these soldiers managed to persuade the emperor to allow them to stay. Josephus concludes that these same soldiers later led to disasters for the peoples, right? As Josephus' narrative suggests, soldiers often became attached to local areas. By the 2nd century, soldiers were usually recruited locally and stationed in single location, but stability was less characteristic. Right? Now, this says by the 2nd century, right? Paul, right? Cornelius, this is during what? The 1st century, right? So this is what was going on. It says in the 1st century, but more common than the earlier times. Military camps were often closely connected with their locales. In peacetime, soldiers could function as both engineers, some projects solely for their own benefit, but others, like bridges and roads, would ultimately be put to more civilian use. Rome also used military engineers and soldiers to help local public projects. Localities help supply army camps, which helped to stimulate local economies. Temporary settlements often grew up around any camps containing merchants, artisans, and women who often bore children to the soldiers. It appears that the soldiers stationed in Caesarea felt at home and their wish to remain, right? So again, right, they got them from local Syrians, typically, right? And as we brought out earlier through via Cherekova, you had what? Jews all over Syria, right? Josephus says you had more Jews in Syria than any other place outside of Palestine, right? Kind of like, for instance, for Puerto Rico, right? For Puerto Ricans, there's more Puerto Ricans that live in New York City, just New York City, than in Puerto Rico. So the diaspora, because the children of Israel are the sands of the sea, the stars of the sky, they're very, very fruitful. All right. So bing, bang, boom. The narrative that, Joseph, Cornelius, he's a heathen. He's from the Italian land. We can put that to bed, right? It's over for niggas, right? So now we talked about Tiberius Julius Alexander, this bootlicking ass nigga, right? So now let's read Acts 10, right? And Peter's vision. Let's get into the actual text.
Okay. This is Acts chapter 10. You should start at verse 11.
Great point, Ruben. Right, another great point. Colin Powell was a 4-star general and is a Benjamite. Ain't no new thing under the sun.
It was like Marcus Garvey, didn't he ascend to like high level?
No, he wasn't. He was very anti the establishment. But let's read that out.
I thought he like got like
he bought a shipping company, right? And he was trying to get niggas to go back to Africa.
Yeah. This is Acts 10 and 11. And Saul, that's what you want. Yeah. And Saul, heaven opened, and a certain vessel descending.
A certain what?
Vessel.
A certain vessel. Pay attention to the word vessel, right? We're going to get deep. Read on.
Descending unto him, as it had been a great sheet knit at the four corners, and let down to the earth, wherein were all manner of 4-footed beasts of the earth, and wild beasts, and creepy things, and fowls of the air. And there came a voice to him, Rise, Peter, kill and eat. But Peter said, Not so, Lord, for I have never eaten anything that is common or unclean.
Common or unclean. Pay attention to, so common, unclean, vessel, right? Beast. These are very important words, right? Read on.
And the voice spake unto him again the second time, What God hath cleansed, that call not thou common.
What God hath cleansed. See, God, the Most High God, he speaks through the mouth of his prophets, right? So we're going to see how God speaks through the mouth of his prophets as pertaining to this, right? Read on.
Con, what God, Salakia, again, what God hath cleansed, that call not thou common. This was done thrice, and the vessel was received up again into heaven.
Okay, so now here in Acts 10 and 11, right? The word we have here that's translated as vessel is this Greek word right here, Strong's G 4632, right? Skaios. Skaios. Let's take a look at the Thayer's Greek lexicon. This word right here is translated in Septuagint as this word right here, right? My good brother Zion Lex will probably pronounce this Kali, right? Or Kalia, right? Kalia, right? So let's take a look at where this, we're gonna go to a bunch of places where this word is translated. Let's get Isaiah 52. Now, Isaiah 52, right? If you guys did not watch my last video, right? After this video is done, right? You need to watch the video on another gospel being taught by the brothers who now are forwarding that that Cornelius is a heathen, and we just saw all this evidence to prove otherwise. And now we're going to look into the text of what's going on concerning Cornelius in Acts the 10th chapter. Right now, what I want to also note is that in Acts the 10th chapter, it says that Cornelius had a great rapport amongst the people. When it says he had a great rapport amongst the people,
Hang tight, yo.
all praises. Can y'all hear me? Check, check, check.
Con.
All praise to Moses. Lucky. I knocked out my power source and it disconnected my camera and my mic. So let me just get us that set up here. What was I saying? Okay, so I was speaking to what we just brought out in all these different scholarly sources, right? Since brothers want to, they only respect scholars, right? I sound muffled.
Clear to me.
Audio. Check, check, check. Okay, cool. Yeah, I should be good. Right, all praise to the Most High. So again, there was tension between the Syrian Greeks, the Hellenized Greeks, Hellenized Syrians, and the Jews, right? The fact that it says that in Acts 10 that Cornelius is a devout man, one who feared God, right? One who gave me alms to the people. He had a good report amongst the people. What people would that have been? The Jews there. But there was tension between the vast majority of people of his ilk, right? His fellow Greeks, Hellenized individuals, right? Mind you, he has a Roman name, right? A Latin name, right? So we see here, right, that there is a vessel, right? What God called common, what God has cleansed, do not call common or unclean. So we got to pay attention to the words vessel, common, unclean, or cleansed. We have to pay attention to the word beast. These are very key terms that we're going to bring out very shortly. So again, we see the word, this Greek word is translated throughout the Septuagint for the word kali, which means vessel, right?
No,
so let's read. So I was saying, if you watch my video where I'm saying how these brothers are teaching another gospel, right? I go into Isaiah 52, right? I go into Isaiah 40, I'm going to Isaiah 61, I'm going to Isaiah 62, right? The idea that non-Israelites are receiving access to the new covenant, receiving the salvation that Israel gets, right? That goes against the gospel. Thus saith the Lord, right? So let's read Isaiah 52 from verse 7.
Khan started at verse 7. It says, how beautiful upon the mountains are the feet of him that bringeth good tidings, that publisheth peace, that bringeth good tidings of good, that publisheth salvation.
That publisheth what?
Salvation. That saith unto Zion.
Unto who?
Unto Zion.
Unto Zion, which represents the Israelites. What?
Thy God reigneth.
Your God reigneth. Right? Very important. Okay? Your God reigneth. Zion. This is the gospel. The good news. The good tidings. Verse 8.
Verse 8. Thy watchmen shall lift up the voice. With the voice together shall they sing. For they shall see eye to eye, when the Lord shall bring again Zion. Break forth into joy, sing together, ye waste places of Jerusalem.
Come on.
For the Lord have comforted his people.
He have comforted who?
His people.
His people, the Israelites, and have what?
He have redeemed Jerusalem.
Redeemed Jerusalem, again, which represents the Israelites. Read.
Con, that's in Luke.
No, keep going. Isaiah, verse 10.
Verse 10, the Lord have made bare his holy arm in the eyes of all nations. And all the ends of the earth shall see the salvation of our God.
So let's slow down, right? We have to unpack this particular verse, right? So in Isaiah 40, right, which is the first place prophetically we see the usage of the gospel, right? The first prophetic mention of the gospel is in Isaiah the 40th chapter. And it just so happens that in verse 10, it talks about his holy arm. It says that his holy arm shall rule for him. Talking about Yahawah, the Father, right? Who's going to give dominion to the Son of Man, which is Hamashiach Yahawashi, right? When we look here at verse 10, it says he have made bare his holy arm in the eyes of all the nations, meaning Yahawashi was crucified, right? He's the most famous man ever. The whole world knows about it. They didn't all physically see it, right? But we see all types of reenactments. We got the Passion of the Christ, blah, 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 right? Everyone knows about Jesus and his crucifixion, right? And it says, all the ends of the earth shall see the salvation of our God. But when we read further up, it says in verse 7, publish this good news and publish this salvation and say unto Zion, your God reigns. So this is the gospel, right? Read on.
Con, verse 11. Excuse me. Depart ye. Go ye out from thence. Touch no unclean thing.
Touch no unclean. Come out from where you are. Touch no unclean thing, right? Read on.
Go ye out of the midst of her. Be ye clean.
Be ye clean. This is talking to Israel. Be ye clean. Right? Now, how would Israelites become filthy? Oh, by breaking the commandments. Right? The scriptures tell us, wherewithal shall a young man cleanse his way, but by taking heed to the word of God. Who is the word of God? Hamashiach Yahawashi. So again, Yahawashi died not just for the Jew, not just for the Hellenistes, but also for the Hellenized Jew. This is who the apostles are going to, right? It's very clear. This is who Paul is writing to. Read on. Be ye clean.
Be ye clean that bear the vessels of the Lord.
So these are the vessels of the Lord, the Israelites who are coming from out of her, coming from the midst of the other nations. He's saying, be clean. You're clean. And you're the vessels of the Lord, right? So this vessel, right? That word that's used in Acts 10, right? Skeu, right? Skeuos is the translation of the word kali, right? Which means vessel all throughout the so-called Old Testament, right? Here that word is used for vessels here in Isaiah 52, right? Read verse 12.
Verse 12. For ye shall not go out with haste, nor go by flight, for the Lord will go before you, and the God of Israel will be your reward.
The God of Israel will be your reward. Who is the your? Zion, the Israelites, not Edomites, not Ammonites, not Moabites, not any other than an Israelite. That's it. Thus saith the Lord. Again, I bring this out all the time. This is one of my favorite. Again, I love Isaiah. Isaiah is my favorite prophet. And what we have to understand is that the Most High God speaks through the mouth of his prophets. In Isaiah 8 and 20, it says, to the law and to the testimony, if they speak not according to this word, is because there's no light in them. The testimony will be the prophets, right? Revelation 19 and 10 and 11 says that the testimony of Jesus Christ, Yahawashi, Hamashiach, is the spirit of prophecy. Yahawashi said, well did Isaiah prophesy, right? So this word that's translated as vessel that's coming down from heaven with all these wild beasts, unclean beasts, that same word is used for vessels all throughout the New Testament, and is being spoken of Israelites being told to be clean. And what washes us? What makes us clean? It's the blood of Hamashiach Yahawashi, right? When I was growing up in the church, right, I used to sing on the choir back in college, and one of my favorite songs was "The Blood Still Works." The blood of Yahawashi is upon us, right? When we buffeted him, right? When we offered him up, and I'm saying I'm just talking about the Jews at that time. When he was offered up, right? That was a ritual. That was a Levitical ritual that was going on. He was buffeted. They put his hands on him as the priests put their hands on a sacrifice. He is led as a lamb to the slaughter, but he spake not a word, right? He was done before the shearers, right? To be cut off. When you go to the shearers as a lamb, what's getting ready to happen? That fur, that wool's getting ready to be cut off, right? But he was led as a lamb to the slaughter. And what do we say? His blood be upon us
and our children.
And our children, right? Listen, I know it was blood. This is what cleanses us. Yahawashi's sacrifice, his blood, is what cleansed us. And this is prophesied in Isaiah, the 53rd chapter. The next chapter, might I add. But let's continue, right? This is easy work, right? This is easy work through the spirit and power of Yahawah Shem Yahawashi. The fact that niggas don't get this in 2025, listen, like the elder Yahawashi said, if a nigga don't get it, we are moving on, right? Let's continue.
Kind of where 13.
So now let's go to Hosea. That's on there, right? Let's go to Hosea chapter 8 and verse 5.
Hosea 8, verse 5.
And real quick, before we read it, I want to make something clear, right? when you look at Caesarea is in the more, it's not in Judea, it's in the more northern part of Israel, right? Just go on Google Maps and see what's the distance between Caesarea and Samaria, right? We know that we had Israelites who were called Samaritans that were living in Samaria amongst the other Samaritans who were actual heathen, because during the Assyrians, they brought men from Hamath and from Babylon, right, and from Sepharvaim and all these other places into Samaria, right? And then you had this syncretism, right, where they start marrying the Torah with their paganism, right? And of course, who was still around there, you still had a remnant of Northern Kingdom up there, right? So I'm not going to say one way or another whether or not Cornelius was a Northern Kingdom or Southern Kingdom. He could have been either or. What we do see is we see Jews, Southern Kingdom, being Hellenized, right? We've seen throughout the annals of time, Northern Kingdom just being obscenely pagan, right? Mm-hmm. And when Yahawashi talks to the woman at the well, she's a Samaritan, and she says that our father Jacob built this well. Jacob is the father of the Israelites. We know that we have Anna, of the tribe of Asher. She's in the land at that time. So again, we had Northern Kingdom there. By and large, they were not there. Right now, Yahawashi talks about how he has sheep not of this fold. And he said that he was only sent but unto who? The lost sheep of the house of Israel. He spoke to a Israelite woman from the Northern Kingdom in John the 4th chapter at the well. Right? Caiaphas prophesied that Yahawashi will be cut off, and not for that nation only, but also who else? Those who are scattered, right? The diaspora. This gets deep through the spirit and power of Yahawashi shanyam-ishar, right? Yo, Azariah, please shut up, nigga. Please shut up. God damn, I cannot stand Israelites sometimes. Lord in Christ, I'm putting this nigga in timeout again. But you can pay attention. Right? So anyway, let's go to Hosea chapter 8. This is another place where the word kali is used for vessel, right? And we also see this, the Septuagint translation of it is that same word skaios, right? So let's read.
Hosea chapter 8, starting at verse 5.
Mm-hmm.
Thy calf, O Samaria, hath cast thee off.
Oh, Salakia, right? Salakia. So I was making a point about Caesarea and Samaria. The distance between Caesarea and Samaria is not far at all, right? Not far at all. Actually, let me go to Google Maps real quick. Watch this. Watch this. Google Maps, right? So we're going to put Caesarea. Caesarea, Israel. Directions to Samaria. Driving is 1 hour and 30 minutes. Walking is 12 hours. We read all throughout the so-called New Testament, Yahawashi walking from Judea. They traveled from Judea all the way up to Galilee and back and forth, right? They were using like very non-fast means of travel, right? Niggas was walking, taking a horse, a donkey, what have you, right? So it doesn't take long to get from Samaria to Caesarea, for the record, right? So could he be Northern Kingdom? Could he be Southern Kingdom? We don't know, right? But we know he was an Israelite, because in that time you had Israelites who were in the Roman Empire army, and when they were enfranchised from the localities of the places where they were stationed, they took on Roman names, right? So let's look at Hosea chapter 8 and verse 5.
Hosea chapter 8, verse 5. Thy calf, O Samaria, hath cast thee off. Mine anger is kindled against them. how long will it be ere how long would it be ere they attain to innocency?
How long are they going to continue the error, right? And when are they going to try to become innocent? When are they going to try to repent, right? Read on.
For from Israel was it also. The workman made it. Therefore it is not God. But the calf of Samaria shall be broken in pieces.
Come on.
For they have sown the wind, and they shall reap the whirlwind.
So the whirlwind, right? The whirlwind is just God's wrath and destruction that's coming to them. Read on.
It have no stalk. The bud shall yield no meal. If so be it yield, the stranger shall swallow it up.
So whatever comes of Samaria, the strangers, non-Israelites, are going to swallow it up. And guess what? Northern Kingdom was swallowed up by who? The Assyrians, right? Read on.
Israel is swallowed up. Now shall they be among the Gentiles.
Shall be among the Gentiles as what?
As a vessel wherein is no pleasure.
A vessel wherein there is no pleasure. God said that Israel, referring to Northern Kingdom in this context, would be swallowed up by the heathen. They'll be scattered among the heathen, among the Gentiles, as non-pleasurable vessels. The same word that's used here in Acts 10 is the same word that's used here in the Greek of this text, right? Let's continue. Go to Hosea chapter 13 and verse 12.
This is Hosea chapter 13 and verse 12. The iniquity of Ephraim is bound up. His sin is hid.
His is bound up. His sin is hid, right? Meaning he's now being healed from his iniquity. Read on.
The sorrows of a travailing woman shall come upon him. He is an unwise son, for he should not stay long in the place of the breaking forth of child. I will ransom them from the power of the grave.
I will ransom them from the power of the grave. Is that not what Yahawashi did through his blood, which was shed for my people Israel? Right? Read on.
I will redeem them from death. O death, I will be thy plagues. O grave, I will be thy destruction. Repentance shall be hid from mine eyes.
All right, let's read on.
Though he be fruitful among his brethren, an east wind shall come, the wind of the Lord shall come up from the wilderness.
So when we see the phraseology, the usage of the east wind comes from the west and blows east, right? We look in the book of Jeremiah, it says that I will scatter them as with an east wind, right? Northern Kingdom, where they go, by and large, went into where? Assyria, right? They by and large they left Assyria, came to Arsareth, which would be east of there, right? Even if you're looking at Samaria, right? Caesarea is east of Samaria. Just pointing that out, right? Read on.
Where was I? Again, verse 15. Though he be fruitful among his brethren, an east wind shall come. The wind of the Lord shall come up from the wilderness, and his spring shall become dry, and his fountain shall be dried up. He shall spoil the treasure of all pleasant vessels.
Of all pleasant what?
Vessels.
All pleasant vessels. Read on.
Samaria shall become desolate. For she have rebelled against her God. They shall fall by the sword. Their infants shall be dashed in pieces, and their women with child shall be ripped up.
So when did this happen? When the Assyrians came in and spoiled their land, right? Came with an east wind. Last time I checked, Assyria is northeast of Samaria, right? Came, spoiled them up, right? Spoiled the treasure of all the pleasant vessels. The treasures were the bountiful harvest from the promised land that God gave to the children of Israel. And in this context, talking about the northern kingdom, right? The Assyrian came and did what? Spoiled the treasures of all the pleasant vessels. The Israelites are these supposed to be pleasant vessels. But why is Ephraim spoiled? Right? Why? Because of his iniquity, because of his sin, right? So let's move on, right? Let's go back to Acts 10 and we're going to read verse 14, right?
Acts 10, verse 14. But Peter said, "Not so, Lord, for I have never eaten anything that is common or unclean." And the voice spake unto him again the second time, "What God hath cleansed, that call not thou common." This was done thrice.
That's on that, right? So the point is, God said, "What I have cleansed, don't you call uncommon," right? Again, going back to Hosea 8 and verse 8, it says, "Israel is swallowed up. Now shall they be among the Gentiles as vessels wherein there's no pleasure," right? So they were unpleasurable. This is why he's giving them the vision, right? This vision of a vessel with unclean beasts, right? And he's saying, "Hey, arise and eat." Why? Because he's a Jew and he's remained in Jewry. He's remained in keeping the commandments, right? So he said, "I've never eaten anything common or unclean." And he says, "Don't call what I've cleansed common or unclean," right? And then when we go to, again, Hosea 13, right? Where we at? Right? Then we will go to 2nd Ezra chapter 8, right? We'll go to 2nd Ezra chapter 8, verse 26. And it's going to get even better. Watch this.
2nd Ezra
8 and 26. This is Ezra praying to the Lord on behalf of who? Of Israel.
2nd Ezra chapter 8, verse 26. "Oh, look not upon the sins of thy people."
The sins of thy people. We read about the iniquity of Ephraim, right? We read about their transgressions, their evil, right? Read on.
"But on them which serve thee in truth."
Again, some of our people, right, have sinned, continue to sin, live in a lifestyle of sin, and add sin unto sin unto sin. And at this time, we say, listen, there's some of us that serve thee in truth, right? Read on.
"Regard not the wicked inventions of the heathen, but the desire of those that keep thy testimonies in affliction."
Right. Read on. So now, right, depending on how you look at this, right, you can say that, oh, he's talking about the actual heathen, right? But I would surmise that he's actually talking about our people who have lived in iniquity, right? And who has lived in more iniquity, right, than the northern kingdom, who was so iniquitous and so evil that the Most High God, by and large, got them from in front of his face, cast them out of the land. They never came back, by and large, right? Read on.
Verse 28. Think not upon those that have walked vainly before thee, but remember them which according to thy will have known thy fear.
Again, because some of us keep your commandments, some of us don't. Remember us, right? Read on. Don't take the promises that you gave to our fathers, right, and give it to someone else, right? Read on.
"Let it not be thy will to destroy them which have lived like beasts."
He's also praying for our people who have done what? Lived like beasts. The heathen are called beasts throughout the scriptures. He's saying, do not destroy them of us that have lived like the beasts, like the heathen. Read on.
"But to look upon them that have clearly taught thy law."
Read on.
"Take thou no indignation at them which are deemed worse than beasts."
Deemed what?
Worse than beasts.
Why would the children of Israel who live like the beasts be deemed worse than beasts? Because they were chosen above all nations to be a holy and separate people, right? Above all nations. But they condescended down to the level of people who God put them above and lived like them. So now you're worse than a beast, right? Think about it. This is in the mindset of Jews from this time forward and even prior to, right? Read on.
But love them that always put their trust in thy righteousness and glory. For we and our fathers do languish of such diseases, but because of us sinners, thou shalt be called merciful. For if thou hast a desire to have mercy upon us, thou shalt be called merciful to us, namely, that have no works of righteousness.
Again, talking about of our people. So just like Moses prayed to the Most High, spoke to the Most High on behalf of Israel, where God said, listen, I'm about to kill all these niggas and start over with just you, Moses. He said, Lord, you can't do that. Don't do that for your name's sake. Because guess what? If God did that, right, he wouldn't be breaking his promise, because Moses would have still been a descendant of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And through his loins, a nation, right, could have been restarted, right? A new nation, right? But he said, don't do that. You just brought us out of the land of Egypt, right? Your name, right? You know, in your judgment, your name is going to go, and the fear of the dread of your name is going to be on the heathen. Very similarly, so Ezra, who also talked to an angel in a burning bush, prays for on Israel's behalf on the righteous and the sinner, and said, don't let it not be your will in your indignation to pour upon your wrath and to destroy those who have lived like beasts and have been deemed worse than beasts. So this is what's been going on, and this is what we got to understand in this time, right? So we finished up on that, right? So now going back to Isaiah 52, right? The Lord says, right? Depart ye, come out from thence. Out from where? From where you've been scattered amongst the nations, right? Because guess what? Your salvation, the whole earth is going to see the salvation of our God when he saves us from amongst them, where he's now telling them to touch no unclean thing, because you need to be clean. Come out of the midst of her, be clean, that bear the vessels of Yahawah, right? These vessels are now made clean, right? These people who lived like beasts are now made clean through the blood of Hamashiach Yahawashi, which was shed for the remission of sins of the children of Israel. So now, Acts 10, right, in verse 28, read that.
Acts, you said 28 and 10?
10 and 28.
10 and 28. Salakia. This is Acts 10, verse 28. And he said unto them, ye know how that it is an unlawful thing for a man that is a Jew to keep company or come unto one of another nation. But God hath showed me that I should not call any man common or unclean.
Any man, right? So for the Christians, oh, God cleansed all meats, and Peter. My mom, to this day, I'm like, Mom, this has absolutely nothing to do with you being able to eat a Baconator, right? This vessel with these unclean beasts are about men. God has shown me that I should call no man common or unclean, right? So now, right, because God cleansed. Who did God promise he will cleanse? The children of Israel, right?
Right.
Literally, it says that I will. If you watch my eternal life video, right, it says that I will sprinkle clean water upon them, and y'all shall all be righteous, right, in the book of Ezekiel, right? So here in verse 28, it says, he said, you know, it's an unlawful thing for a man that is a Jew to keep company with him of another nation. Now, for the gentleman who thought he has a freaking point about, oh, the word alophilos is used, goofy. Alophilos, alos meaning another, phile means tribe. Right? Again, why is Peter saying it's an unlawful thing for a Jew to keep company, to eat with someone who is of another nation or of another phile, another tribe? That word means tribe, right? It's translated as tribes, right? Let's look at the law, right? So again, Cornelius was what? Uncircumcised, right? Right after Acts 10, we have Acts 11. Okay, and what does Paul? What is not Paul? What is said to Peter in Acts 11? Let's read Acts 11 from the top.
Acts 11 from the top. And the apostles and brethren that were in Judea heard that the Gentiles had also received the word of God. And when Peter was come up to Jerusalem, they that were of the circumcision contended with him.
Them of the what?
Circumcision.
The circumcision. Read on.
Contended with him, saying, Thou wentest in to men uncircumcised, and did eats with them.
So they're like, you went and sat with the uncircumcised and you ate with them? What? Why are their flabbergasted? Why? And why would Peter say, it's an unlawful thing for one as a Jew to sit with one of another nation, alophilos, another tribe, right? Of another tribe, people, nation, whatever you want to call it, right? Let's see, right? Read on, verse 4.
Verse 4. But Peter rehearsed the matter from the beginning and expounded it by order unto them, saying,
that's fine on that, right? He just giving the rundown, right? So why are the brethren flabbergasted that not Paul, that should say Peter, I'll fix that, ate with the uncircumcised, right? Genesis 17 and 14. And the uncircumcised man-child, whose flesh is of his foreskin, is not circumcised, that soul shall be cut off from his people. He have broken my covenant, right? The word for cut off is the word karath, which means to cut off, right? It also means to make a covenant, right? When you break God's covenant, right? By not cutting off your foreskin of your man-child when he's 8 days old, right? That child now you have now broken the covenant of not circumcising your child. Now that child is cut off from the people. And subsequently, who else would be cut off? You as well. So you cannot be amongst us. You're cast off. You're alienated from the people. Who's the people? Israel. You are alienated from the commonwealth of Israel. Very simple. But Christ died for the reconciliation, the bringing back together of the children of Israel. When we look at Ezekiel the 37th chapter, right? Just dropped the video, all right, on House of Bread as well as this channel, right? Going into the valley of dry bones, Ezekiel 37, right? And Ezekiel's told to take the stick of Joseph, which is in the hand of Ephraim, and the stick of Judah and the rest of his brother, and put them together and make them one stick, right? And that's significant of Hamashiach Yahawashi coming and doing what? Gathering them together, making them no more two kingdoms, but one nation and one king. Who's that king? Hamashiach Yahawashi, who shed his blood for the iniquity of my people Israel. It's very simple. Not being circumcised, when you really look at it, is it the baby's fault or was it his parents' fault for not circumcising him? All praise to the Most High God, Yahawah, right? I just had my first child, my son, YAHAWAH, right? Which means Yahawah has prevailed. Okay. I had the pleasure, right? It was I don't even know how to describe it, right? This year, we here at the House of Bread, during the midst of all the chaos that happened early in this year, the Most High God allowed us to pivot from going to Atlanta and keeping Passover with Sakari, right? We kept it here. We established House of Bread, and we had a Passover, a textbook Passover, where we separated the lamb on the 10th day, right? We slaughtered that evening on the 14th. I still got the blood on my doorposts. All praises to Yahweh basham Yahawashi, right? And guess what? We're already in preparation for the next Passover through the Spirit and power of Yahweh basham Yahawashi, right? I had the pleasure that after that happening, right? I had the pleasure of having my first child, a baby boy, who me and my wife we dedicated as a Nazarite unto the Most High God, into the kingdom. He was born. He's a little over 3 months now, right? And we had the pleasure of having him circumcised on the 8th day by a brother in the faith. All praise to Yahweh basham Yahawashi. If we didn't do that, if I did not, like, I'm gonna let you guys in on something, right? My mom and my dad did not circumcise me when I was born, nor my little brother. It was on both of us are in the truth now. It was on both of our spirits when we were teenagers. Hey, we need to get circumcised. This is well before coming into the truth, right? I had the pleasure of having my son, my firstborn son, who I love dearly. He's the most beautiful baby I've ever seen in my life, right? Had him circumcised on the 8th day. Was it my fault that I wasn't circumcised on the 8th day when I was born? Was it any of you brothers' fault that you weren't circumcised on the 8th day? Because usually here in America, if your parents circumcise you, right, you're circumcised within the first 2 days. They shoot you up with vitamin K, right? So that they can have your blood clot or whatever, right? A whole bunch of BS in there, right? And you get circumcised within like the first 2 days of your life. No, the Most High God said on the 8th day. Guess what? I held my baby boy as the brother, right? Circumcised him, right? He was crying his ass off. My wife and my mom are in the corner boo-hooing. I'm over here holding it down, holding my baby boy, right? All praise to Yahawashi, shanyam-ishar, right? Because I take the commandments of God seriously and teaching the commandments of God seriously. Teaching and doing it seriously. Here at House of Bread, we believe in Matthew 4:4. That's our motto. Hence why the intro song, right? Everyone's always saying, "Oh, what's the name of that song?" The name of the song is Matthew 4:4 Freestyle by the good brother Jake Juvel, right? And that song, right, in the scripture, which is named after, is man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceedeth out of the mouth of God. Again, it's not the child's fault that his parents did not circumcise him. Right? So this will go into Acts 15. Listen, through the spirit of power, Yahawashi, we're going to dismantle all the misconceptions and the nonsense that's getting forwarded within this community right now as it pertains to Gentile salvation, simultaneous salvation. Who Paul's talking to. We're showing through history, through prophecy, through the scriptures, how Cornelius is clearly an Israelite. Right? So again, why would Peter say, it's an unlawful thing for me to deal with you? Because he's supposed to be cut off from the people. Very simple. Let's continue. Let's get John chapter 7 and verse 33, Bible Basham. Oh, we cooking through the spirit, man. All praise to the Most High. Listen, we had the Shabbat, right? We right now we're with the rest of the nation. Shabbat's Friday, Saturday, right? We little Sabbath keepers, right? Listen, if I would have did this last night, man, it would have been unlawful, man, for us to be cooking like this on the Sabbath. But right now, the Sabbath ended. You know what I mean? A couple hours ago, and we cooking through the spirit and power of Yahawashi, Yahawashi. All praise to the Most High.
What was that? John 7:33.
John 7:33. Azariah, you, my friend, right? You are now banned from the chat because again, if a nigga don't get it, we're moving on. Screw all of this history that I brought out through the spirit and power of Yahawashi. Screw that. Screw all this prophecy that's being broken down through the spirit of Yahawashi. Screw. Oh, show me an Israelite clean called laYAHAWAH. Cornelius, goofy. Now let's move on.
This is John 7, verse 33. Then said Yahawashi unto them, yet a little while am I with you, and then I go out unto him that sent me. Then I go unto him that sent me.
The Father.
Ye shall seek me and shall not find me. And where I am, thither ye cannot come.
Where I'm going, you can't come. I'm going to the spiritual realm. You can't come with me. Right? Read on.
Then said the Jews among themselves. Whither will he go that we shall not find him?
Where is he going that we ain't gonna be able to find him?
Will he go unto the dispersed among the Gentiles and teach the Gentiles?
So here we see very clearly that the dispersed amongst the Gentiles are being called Gentiles. The dispersed amongst the Gentiles, they're dispersed from where? Dispersed from Israel, right? The Greek words diaspora, right? Spore. The word spore, right? And this goes into why mushrooms are not unlawful, right? Mushrooms grow from spores. They release spores. Even pollen is a spore, right? But the word spore etymologically means seed. The diaspora is the scattering of the seed of Israel to the four corners of the earth, right? So, with that said, the dispersed amongst the Gentiles, right, are being called Gentiles, right? And when we look at the Greek syntax, the parsing of the Greek, it says the diasporan down Hellenon, right? Diasporan, right? That's how it's inflected. Diasporan is in the accusative case, right? They're dispersed amongst where? The Hellenon, which is in the genitive case. Different set of people, right? And just so you guys understand, the genitive case refers to a noun or pronoun, right? That is the object, right? When you look at what's called the accusative case, all right, the accusative case in the Greek language, all right, denotes the accusative case refers to the case used for a noun or pronoun that is the direct object, right? Talking about the dispersed, right? And when we look at the genitive case, right, when you go on to Blue Letter, they changed this, John, a few years ago. But when you just look up genitive case, right, when you're doing the breakdown, relating or denoting to a case of a noun or pronoun, right, indicating close association, right? So clearly it's two different cases, right? And the dispersed amongst the Gentiles are being called Hellenas, right? When he goes to the dispersed, the diasporan amongst the Hellenon and teach the Hellenas. Who are the Hellenas? Oh, Hellenas also happens to be in the accusative case, showing that the dispersed are being called Hellenas. They're being called Greeks, called Gentiles. They're not being called what? Israelites. They're cut off from the people. These Greeks, as we read on, are what? Uncircumcised. Hence why it's Peter says it's an unlawful thing for me, a Jew, to be accompanied with you of another tribe, of another people, because you're cut off from who? From us. Now, Phile is used in reference to who? It's used in reference to Judah, to Israel, several places throughout the scriptures. So when you got a simple nigga like Azariah, or whatever his name was, right? Oh, show me a Jew being called, or Israelite called Alophilos. What you demonstrate is that you have a third grade reading comprehension skills, right? And you cannot understand information. All of this information that we brought out in this book, right, as a plethora of other sources attesting to you the fact that you had Jews in the Roman military as high up as the top of the food chain. The nigga who was second in charge during the first Roman-Jewish War, the siege of Jerusalem, was an Alexandrian Jew who is the nephew of Philo, a renowned Jew. But somehow, some way, Cornelius can't be an Israelite because he's called Alophilos. He can't be an Israelite because he lives in Caesarea. He can't be an Israelite because he's a centurion. When I just read to you, when it pertains to the Roman military, they literally incorporated individuals from the locale in which they lived. And at that time, in that time frame, you had Jews all over the known world. Egypt, Cappadocia, they were, bro, it says Babylonia, right? Elamites, dwellers of Mesopotamia, right? I read a source where it says that 2,000 Jewish families were taken from Babylonia and brought to where? Asia Minor. The backdrop of Paul and the other apostles like Barnabas, their mission. What you're saying is, all that information went through one ear is going to come out the other. Oh, do you have an answer for Alophilos? I swear, some of you niggas are just, there's no hope in some of you guys. And it's sad. I'll truly do all this work, right? All this scholarship to present information to our people so that we can understand the truth. This is a labor of love. And when you have silly niggas who don't know anything, right? Who just want to be gainsayers, right? They love to just run their mouth, right? And here we have another goofball, wildolatry. Wildolatry. All right, I already destroyed this so-called understanding of Amos chapter 9, right? The Hebrew grammar demonstrates that the individuals who are doing the possessing of the heathen are the same people who God's name is upon. All right, and the prophet Isaiah would completely disagree with your interpretation of Amos the 9th chapter. All right, another goofball. Let's get you in timeout, right? So now, right, let's move on to Ephesians chapter 2 and verse 11. You had a point, Op?
Con, just on the, you know, like I said, when we were just dealing with basically Yahawah saying, you know, don't call him, you know, don't call
what I cleansed
uncommon what he cleansed, right? The strong point in 1 Corinthians chapter 10, I wanted to go into the word baptized, right? Because it's about our people, right? So 1 Corinthians chapter 10 and verse 1 and 2, it says, moreover, brethren, right? So we know this is talking about Israelites, right? We know it's talking about our people. He said,
First Corinthians, the first chapter, Paul identifies these individuals as saints. The Bible only ever declares the Israelites as saints. Psalms 50 and 5, Psalms 148 and verse 14. Those that have made a covenant with me by sacrifice, right? Gather my saints together, yea, even the children of Israel, right? So the children of Israel are called saints. This is who Paul is talking to, right? Read on.
Con. And again, if we're talking about, you know, this parable of the clean and unclean thing, we know Yahawah was talking about people. Nowhere have we ever seen Yahawah say he's cleansed, you know, the heathen, right? Nowhere. But we see, right, but we see all over the word, especially in our laws, right, where what's making us be deemed unclean and clean, right? What's making us be abominable, right? And righteous, which is basically, again, all synonymous with clean and unclean. Basically, us living, you know, breaking the laws is, you know, that it's making us unclean, right? But this point right here, I wanted to point out because it talks about specifically him cleansing us, right? Us as a people, Israel. It says, moreover, brethren, I would not that ye should be ignorant how that all our fathers were under the cloud. Now we know this was the innumerable multitude, right? This was the mixed multitude.
Mixed multitude was amongst us.
But who's he's talking about is talking about Israelites. This is not even though we know heathen were here, he's talking about specifically the Israelites. Right? Verse 2, it says, and were all baptized unto Moses in the cloud and in the sea. So he's talking about Israel being baptized. Right? When you go into this word right here for baptized, right? Baptizo, right? You go into the biblical usage, right? One is dipped repeatedly, to immerse, to submerge. The second one is to cleanse by dipping or submerging, to wash, to make clean with water. In this whole context, like I said, this is heathens were with us when this happened, but he's addressing, we're talking about the Israelites right here.
Salaki, we're going to chapter 12. It says, now, verse 1, now concerning spiritual gifts, brethren, I would not have you ignorant. Ye know that ye were Gentiles carried away unto these dumb idols, even as you were led. Who led them?
Right.
Who led them? They were following who? The actual Gentiles. You were a Gentile because you were led away by the Gentiles to worship their idols. How could, if Gentile in this context means non-Israelite, how can you in times past be a non-Israelite and now be an Israelite? That doesn't make a lick of sense. Does not make sense. But this is how you harmonize the Bible, right? Love them brothers to death. They're trying to harmonize the Bible. They're missing all of this history, right? They're not even thinking about this stuff. And because they're so wrapped up in these silly ass Greek words, right? Now they're in a whirlwind of bullshit because the Greek language is a bullshit language, right? We're Hebrew Israelites. We're not even talking about Hebrew. Niggas are getting caught up on Greek words. When the Bible tells us, right, when we look at the prologue for Sirach, it says that things that are uttered in the Hebrew have not the same force in other languages, right? But again, this is crazy. So let's get into Ephesians chapter 2. And this puts it all into perspective.
Ephesians 2 and 11. Ephesians 2 and 11. Wherefore remember that ye being in time past Gentiles in the flesh.
Okay, so let's slow this down, right? Being in time past Gentiles in the flesh. How is one a Gentile in the flesh? Read.
Who are called uncircumcision.
You're called uncircumcision. Hence, when Peter went and dwelt with Cornelius and his family, and the apostles, like the brother said, you went in to the uncircumcised and ate with them? What?
Yep.
Because it was an unlawful thing, but God is cleansing them through who? He's giving them access to be redeemed, to be reconciled through the washing blood of Hamashiach Yahawashi. Read on.
Which is another baptism, right? Like we just pointed out in Corinthians 10.
Mm-hmm.
It's another form of being washed, right? Another chance to be washed. By that which is called the circumcision in the flesh, made by hands, that at that time ye were without Hamashiach.
You were without Christ,
being aliens from aliens from the commonwealth of Israel.
Why would they be aliens from the commonwealth of Israel? Oh, because Genesis 17 says you cut them off from the people. That's how because you weren't circumcised. That's how you are alienated from the commonwealth of Israel. This is so easy. A caveman can get it, right? Read on.
And strangers from the covenants of promise.
You've been estranged from the covenant of promise. Who were the covenants given to? Who are the promises given to? Paul lets us know in Romans 9, 3 and 4 that the covenants belong or pertain to Israel. And as for the fathers, the promises, that's why Christ came. The promises and the covenants belong to the Israelites who were uncircumcised and following the heathen, carried away unto idols and not worshiping our God. They are alienated from the commonwealth of Israel, right? Alienated from the commonwealth of Israel, right? Read on.
And Salakia, just to add, this is how you know this is talking about Israelites that just went off, because if this is talking about heathen, right, then there's no point of even harping on the covenants and the promises and this and that, because you're already opening it up to, if anybody could be a part of this, then why even stress these points when we know this is the stuff that was given to Israel, right? Mm-hmm. The first fruits of these things is for Israel. Like this is for Israel. So it's like, how can we sit here and try to make it seem like, oh, this uncircumcision is talking about heathens, right? When the context is already letting us know the things that the Most High dealt with, directly with Israel and what he gave to Israel.
Yeah, I just had to time out a bunch of goofballs. I had to, right? Listen, we ain't got time for the nonsense, right? So let's get back to Ephesians 2, right? So you're strangers, you're estranged from the covenants of promise, having no hope. Read on.
Having no hope and without God in the world.
You're in the world amongst the Gentiles, and you're without our God because you were alienated from our God. You were cast off due to your iniquity. You following pagan idols, right? You being uncircumcised, all of this stuff, right? Read on.
But now in Hamashiach Yahawashi, ye who sometime were far off are made nigh by the blood of Hamashiach.
You're reconciled. Read on.
For he is our peace, who have made both one and have
made both what?
Both one.
Again, when we look at Ezekiel 37, Ezekiel's told, take this stick And this stick, Judah and Ephraim, right? Put them together, right? And again, that's all indicative of Hamashiach Yahawashi, of him coming, right? God making an everlasting covenant with them, the house of Israel, and David, their king, ruling over them, right? That being Yahawashi. Okay, very simple. He has, through his blood, he has made you now nigh, you redeemed you, and now made us one. Right? Read that part again.
Khan. Verse 13. But now in Hamashiach Yahawashi, wait, that's where I was at. No, verse 14, Salakia. For he is our peace, who have made both one, and have broken down the middle wall of partition between us, having abolished
the what?
Partition between us.
A middle wall of partition between us. Okay, let's read on.
Khan. Having abolished in his flesh the enmity
between us, because we were divided, right? The house of Israel was divided, right? Read on.
Salaki, I want to see something real quick. The word enmity. Salakia. Even the law of commandments contained in ordinances, for to make in himself of twain one new man, so making peace.
Again, so making peace, right? We go from being two kingdoms, two separate people, to becoming one people, right? And that's and we have peace now, right? The adversaries of Judah shall depart, right? Ephraim shall not vex Judah, and Judah shall not vex Ephraim. Ephraim shall not envy Judah, right? That's that enmity, right? And then even if you're looking at it from the perspective of Jews of Judea and those that became Hellenized and follow the ways of the heathen, they also have access to become what? To be reconciled as well, right? Again, we're talking about uncircumcision. We read in First Maccabees and Second Maccabees how niggas were uncircumcised themselves, how they literally murdered our children when we circumcised our babies and made the mothers wear the babies around their necks. That happened prior to this. If you don't understand that, you will not understand what Paul is doing. You will not understand who Paul is talking to, right? So this is very, very clear, right? That this is talking about Israelites. So now, what we saw in that, right? We saw estranged and alienated, right? Jeremiah 2:21 says, "How have you become a strange vine unto me? And a degenerate plant, I planted you a noble vine," right? Jeremiah 19:4, right, says, "You are estranged from Jerusalem," right? Ezekiel 14:5 says, "You are estranged through your idols," right? Paul literally tells the Corinthians, "You were in times past Gentiles carried away unto these idols, as you were led by who? By the Gentiles that you were living as," right? First Maccabees chapter 12, 1 through 12, we see a letter to the Lacedaemonians, right, who are in Sparta, which is not that far from the coast of Judah and Dan, right? And it says that we are brothers. We have Abraham as a common ancestor, right? These are Danites, which would be northern kingdom. They were traders. They were merchants. They had knowledge of the Mediterranean Sea, but they were estranged and alienated from the Commonwealth of Israel through their paganism, through their uncircumcision, right? We see covenants and promise. Romans 9:3-5 lets us know that the covenants pertain to Israel and that the promises are of our fathers. He then goes on to say in Romans chapter 9 and verse 10 that not only by this, but when Rebekah had conceived by one, even our father Isaac is the father of Esau and Jacob. Paul starts off his letter to the Romans and saying, to the saints, who are only ever called Israelites, who are beloved of God, called saints, who are dwelling in Rome, right? God says that he hates the Edomites, and Paul echoes said sentiment in Romans 9 and 13. So how in the hell would Paul be talking to Edomites, heathen, here in the church at Rome, when he's saying these people are beloved of God? They have Abraham as a forefather in Romans 4 and 1. They have Isaac as a forefather, as we see in Romans 9 and 10. And Isaac, see, Abraham's the father of many nations. He's the father of the Israelites, the Midianites, so forth and so forth, right? He's the father of Isaac, right? And of course, the Edomites and the Israelites. But God has only ever expressed his love for the Israelites and vehemently expressed his hatred and indignation against the Edomites. So how the hell can these guys be Edomites? You have to be deceived or just downright dumb to see that he's talking about Edomites here. That somehow these at the Church of Rome, you got Edomites in the church. Meanwhile, the Christians were getting persecuted by the Romans, who were Edomites by and large. That's literally their land. They had the Latium people, hence we get the term Latin. The language of Rome was Latin from the Latium people. Those were the inhabitants. Those were the people, the rulers in Rome at that time. Doesn't make sense. The covenants is for the Israelites. The promise, right? When we read Deuteronomy 19 and 18, right? It says that these promises were for your fathers, right? When we read Luke chapter 1 and verse 72, right? It says what? It says, we're going to run through these because we're almost done. We're going on over 3 hours through the Spirit and power of Yahawah, shanyam-ishar, right? Luke chapter 1 and verse 72, right? I'll just start at verse 70. As he spake by the mouth of his holy prophets, which have been since the world began, that we should be saved from our enemies and from the hand of all that hate us. And who hates us? Primarily the Edomites. So much so, God says, for your violence and hatred against your brother Jacob, shame shall cover you. But somehow we got brothers saying, oh, they have access to the new covenant, the covenant of peace. The Bible says there's no peace unto the wicked. The Edomites are the border of wickedness. This don't make sense, guys, right? It goes on to say in verse 72, to perform the mercy promised to our fathers and to remember his holy covenant that he made with who? Us and our fathers. Very, very simple, right? Looking at the uncircumcision, right? Get those Maccabees for me real quick. I'm going to touch on this enmity and the middle wall of partition. We're going to touch on these thoroughly, right? So you get First Maccabees 1. I'm going to get Zechariah 11. All right, watch this.
Bring it out.
Go ahead, bring it out.
First Maccabees chapter 1 verse 15. And made themselves uncircumcised and forsook the holy covenant and joined themselves to the heathen and were sold to do mischief.
We're sold to do mischief. Jump down to verse 60. And we're going to verse 64.
Verse 60. At which time, according to the commandment, they put to death certain women that had caused their children to be circumcised, and they hanged the infants about their necks, and rifled their houses, and flew them that had circumcised them.
They killed our people for circumcising their children, right? Now think about this: if people are persecuting, killing you and your children for you circumcising your children, can you understand why some people say, all right, I'm not circumcising my kid? And because of that, what happens? You're now alienated and cut off from the people because you broke the covenant. We ought to obey God rather than men. And as you read on in there, it goes on to say that, listen, there were people that say, you know what? Listen, we'd rather die than to continue to follow these people, right? Read on.
Salakia, just look at the slavery we've been alienated. The gruesome things we've endured here is the reason why Judah has no fight in them anymore.
Great point.
All right. Verse 62. Howbeit, many in Israel were fully resolved and confirmed in themselves not to eat any unclean thing. Wherefore they chose rather to die that they might not be defiled with meat, and that they might not profane the holy covenant.
So that they may not profane the holy covenant. Read on.
So then they died, and there was very great wrath upon Israel.
You see that? So now, right, let's touch on this enmity, right? I'm going to read Zechariah 11 and verse 13. It says, and the Lord said unto me, cast it unto the potter a goodly price. That was priced at of them. And they took the 30 pieces of silver and cast them to the potter in the house of the Lord. Then I cut asunder my other staff, even bands, that I might break the brotherhood between Judah and Israel. Again, the middle wall of partition, the enmity between us. Christ has abolished that in his flesh by reconciling us. Very simple to understand, right? And then we also have Luke 15, verses 11 through 32, where we have the parable of the prodigal son. What happens with the parable of the prodigal son? You have two brothers. You have a father. One brother says, you know what? Give me my inheritance. I'm out. Father gives him his inheritance. He goes and squanders it amongst who? The heathen. Lives as the heathen. Lives riotously like the heathen. Lives like a beast. Ezra said, Lord, let it be not thy will to destroy those that have lived like beasts and are deemed worse than beasts. Going back to what? Acts 10, and this vessel, this unclean vessel with unclean beasts, God has now cleansed. God cleanses through what? Through the blood of Hamashiach Yahawashi, which was shed for the remission of sins and for the children of Israel, for the iniquity of my people. Thus saith the Lord, right? Yahawashi gives this parable because when the brother realizes after he lived amongst the heathen, right, he's come to naught, right? Notice how also when we read in the history how the Jews were in these places, they were well off. Mm-hmm. But the Greeks, they were down bad. And they were some of their solutions was join the military to get out of this situation. The reason why is because they chose not to keep God's commandments. Right? Listen, Joshua 1:8 tells you you will have good success by keeping God's commandments. They didn't have good success because they weren't keeping God's commandments. They were uncircumcised, right? In flesh and in mind, following the heathen, and they grew down bad, right? But now through Hamashiach Yahawashi's sacrifice, his blood was shed for the remission of sins of the children of Israel. They now have reconciliation and redemption through his blood, right? So when we look at the parable of the prodigal son, right? When he comes back home and says, listen, I'll just be a servant in my dad's house, the father welcomes him with open arms, throws a big feast, throws a big party. What happens? Plays the fatted calf. Right? You know how much money cows cost? Right? And what happened? The other brother that stayed home, that remained in Jewry, right? That remained keeping the commandments, he was jealous. He was upset about it. And the father had to know, listen, you my son, all of mine is yours, but your brother being lost is now found. Yahawashi said, I am sent for the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Right? The righteous need not of a physician. I've come to bring sinners to repentance. There's a reason why Yahawashi gave that parable. And if you don't understand those parables, if you don't hear his voice, it's because you're not one of his sheep. Many are called, you are chosen. And if you choose to be ignorantly, just to be dumb, right, and choose to be ignorant of all the history, all the scholarship that went into this understanding, went into this breakdown to demonstrate emphatically that not only Cornelius, but the rest of the Gentiles, the dispersed amongst the Gentiles, right, that these are who Paul and the other apostles were going to. It's abundantly clear. So now, even after the encounter with Cornelius, right, the apostles are still only teaching the Jews, i.e. the circumcision, right? We see this in Acts 11 and verse 19. Now they, which were scattered abroad upon the persecution that arose about Stephen, traveled to Phoenix, which is, what is Phoenix? Phoenicia. This is going to be very important in our Acts 17 breakdown, right? Again, you had Israelites living amongst the Canaanites, right? When Yahawashi told the apostles to not go into the way of the Samaritans, right? Don't go to the Gentiles, but go rather to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Why was he in the coast of Tyre and Zidon? Because there was lost sheep there, right? Phoenicia. It would be Byblos, Tyre, Sidon, all these cities, right? Cyprus, again, which is right off the shores of Israel, right? And Antioch. We read about in the history of Antioch how many Jews there were in Antioch, right? Preaching the word to none but the Jews only, right? Then we see in Acts 13, it says, then Paul and Barnabas waxed bold and said, it is necessary that the word of God should first be spoken unto you. But seeing you put it from you and judge yourselves unworthy of everlasting life, we turn to the Gentiles. Who are these Gentiles? These Israelites who have been Hellenized. These Gentiles are Hellenized Jews / Israelites. Point blank, period. Right? So again, let's do a quick recap, right? Cornelius, is he an Israelite or an Edomite? Right? We demonstrated how, again, Caesarea, right? It started off as a Phoenician city, right? Cornelius lives there in Caesarea, right? He's described as devout. He fears God, right? He gave many alms to the people, and he had a good rapport amongst them. He was uncircumcised. We just read about the circumcision, right? Caesarea, again, originally a Phoenician city and colony, Stratton's Tower, right? Conquered by our people, the Hasmoneans, right? Under Herod, when he came into power, right, he built it up to the metropolis that it was as a Roman administrative trade hub, right? And this was almost like the administrative capital at this point in time. Josephus attests to tens of thousands of Jews living in Caesarea. Tensions between Jews and Syrians, who are called Greeks, they were Hellenized. And in every locality, we see that you had Jews and you had Israelites who became assimilated amongst the Greeks, assimilated amongst the Gentiles, and hence they were called what? Gentiles or Greeks. During Hellenization, right? Our people uncircumcised themselves and left their children uncircumcised, either through force or through just wanting to be like the heathen, right? Again, the word Hellen is used in reference to anyone that came under Greek culture and influence and paganism, right? Again, here's Josephus attesting to the fact that you have tens of thousands of Jews in Caesarea, right? He fixtures in the Hellenic institutions is the gymnasia where they would train naked, pause, crazy, right? And the young men, the ephebos, were trained in the ephebion, which were finishing schools, where they were trained in what? The military, philosophy, and literary studies. They were given this. They were given a sword, a shield, a cloak, and a hat called a petassos that we read about here in 2 Maccabees, the 4th chapter, right? This source lets us know what was going on in these ephebion, right? And then we brought out a plethora, all right, a smorgasbord of information showing the political history of what was going on in the centuries prior to what we see in the so-called New Testament, right? This source right here tells us that you had Jews in Herod's military, and Herod was staying where in Caesarea? He built it up. He had a palace there, right? He built a temple to Augustus. All this stuff was going on in Caesarea, right? We even had a raccoon of raccoons named Tiberius Julius Alexander, the second in command during the Roman-Jewish war. He had a hand in the burning down of our temple, and he was an illustrious from a wealthy Jewish family of Alexandria. And he was specifically sent to squash the rebellion in Judea after he had his legion murder thousands of Alexandrian Jews. This is all the backdrop of what was going on in the 1st century AD and leading up to the 1st century AD, right? Oh, Salakia, all right. So it's abundantly clear, family, right?
Yeah.
Yo, this guy gotta go. This guy's a bug out, right? But yeah, family, right? I pray you brothers and sisters were edified, right? Again, to all the slow pokes, right, in the back, right? If you don't get it, We're moving on. But through the spirit and power of Yahawah Yahawashi, this topic has been, it's clear what's going on. It's clear that he's not an Edomite. It's clear that the apostles are not going to actual heathen. They're going to our people who live like beasts, who lived as a heathen, who were carried away into these dumb idols and were uncircumcised, right? Make sure you guys like and share the video. Make sure you guys are subscribed if you're new to the channel. I looked at the analytics. About like 60% of the viewership are not subscribed. If you are not subscribed, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell icon, and hit all notifications so you get notified. I get comments all the time saying, oh, I never get notified when this brother goes live or when he drops a video, or YouTube unsubscribes me. YouTube does that, right? You know, Blue always talk about that, my gosh. So make sure that you hit the subscribe button, hit the bell icon for Yasharahla as well as House of Bread, right? But with that, I'm going to give all praises, all glory, all honor to the Most High God, whose name is Yahawah. Of course, we do so in the name of his only begotten Son, Hamashiach Yahawashi, who the world inwardly calls Jesus Christ. Until next time, Shalawam and Matawathya.
Matawathya. Shalawam, family.